Tonight is Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. I'd like to call the council as a whole committee to order. Committee members present this evening are Councilors Walsh, Clark, Caddy, Zarella, Squalia, Green, Donnelly, Di Natale, and myself, President Kushmerek. This evening, the agenda will consist of the following. Councilors, items 145. Also joining us this evening is Councilor Boschman. Agenda items this evening pertaining to the budget, 145-19 up to and including 156-19. We'll begin, however, with 155-19, an ordinance amending Chapter 21, Section 18 of the Code of City of Fitchburg by adding a community development revolving fund. I'll turn this over to Auditor Brooks. Councilors, we should entertain this first, and then we'll move on to the items pertaining to the budget. Auditor Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an ordinance change to add the Community Development Revolving Fund to the city ordinance. A couple years ago with municipal modernization, the way revolving funds are handled was changed to where they're created by ordinance and then annually authorized for spending. This is the first time we've added a revolving fund since we set up the ordinance a couple years ago with the rest of the revolving funds. This particular one for community development is so that as they have events, community events, or create marketing tools, they can charge fees, collect donations, collect advertising for their tools, and put it into a revolving fund to pay for the materials or the events that they're doing. These funds are not used in any way on the general fund budget, so there's no conflict with their previous use. Because of the way the fiscal year works, my request is that this council committee as a whole recommend the approval of this ordinance for first reading so that it can get on the agenda for the next council meeting and hopefully would be sent to first reading on June 4th and then final reading on June 18th.
Councilor Squalia.
Do we have any plans or proposed activities that the Community Development Office has for, funding this revolving fund?
Okay, I don't know anything specific that's coming up. I do know they in the past year, they did have an event where they were given some money to have an event. And this is a way to just it's a revolving fund, so money coming in and out without the council having to act on each individual event or each individual gift or fee that they want to do.
So like a business might give a gift to the Community Development Fund in order to fund an event or a project?
Correct.
And that might go towards in this fund?
Correct. Or if they wanted to do a marketing tool, promoting Fitchburg, but they were going to put some advertising in, maybe one of the banks or a couple of the banks would underwrite it. They could use this revolving fund to process the funds.
And what do we mean an annual authorization for spending? Does that mean you're only allowed to spend from this account once a year?
No. If you look on your agenda, item number 154-19 is in order to approve the expenditure of funds from revolving funds that are listed. Mm-hmm. So that's the annual authorization that the council makes in June for the following fiscal year to authorize spending in all of the listed revolving funds.
Just a general authorization for all accounts?
Correct. And this ordinance is just to set up one specific one which has not previously been set up.
Thank you.
Councilor Green.
Are grants allowed to go into this revolving fund?
No. A grant would come through to the council as a grant. This is more for when they do, I don't want to say fundraising because it's not, but it's when they're trying to do events and they're looking for sponsorship or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and second to approve 155-19. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Caddy.
Donate money, is it a write-off for them?
Excuse me, I don't know, and I would say they should talk to their tax accountant.
I have a question.
Councilor Boschman.
May I ask you a question? If we collect the money when they're out there with the buckets to collect money for civic days and all that,
Correct.
right? what are we doing right now with that money? Are we putting it in the bank?
Say for civic days, yes. Yep, it's in an account, it's part of it's in the bank, yes.
So I don't understand why you want this, why we have to vote for this. I really don't understand it.
Okay, so this is creating a revolving fund for community development specifically. Civic days is for civic days and has that purpose.
Okay.
If I don't have a copy of the ordinance authorizing all the other revolving funds, but if you look at that, there's a whole list of different revolving funds.
All right, okay, I understand now. All right.
I have a motion and second to approve 155-19. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous, motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to the budget, we have this evening, tonight is the budget hearing and budget review. Again, there are items 145 up to and including 156-19 that pertain to the budget. We won't be taking action on those this evening, but that's what we'll be speaking to. We'll begin in the following matter. I know the mayor will have a statement, at which point the finance team will then speak to and go through in a thorough and in-depth analysis, an explanation of the budget, I believe in essentially a page-by-page format. During that time, I'd like to encourage and will allow any counselors to ask questions of clarification to make sure that they understand what the finance team has presented, what the items are intended for. I don't want this to turn into a leading question or a subjective question that, this isn't an opportunity for you to speak to or refute the point. This is an opportunity for you to understand the information that they've presented. You'll have an opportunity to for the subjective and opinion and statements later. That said, we'll go through an in-depth analysis, and that's we're adding from last year's process. I know both counselors and some members of the public asked for a little bit more information on what is before us, and can we get the auditor to kind of walk through the inside baseball of what is before us on an annual basis, and what is the process by which the finance team decides and evaluates the budget. And so I've asked the finance team to really do a more in-depth analysis for us this year. Following that, we'll take a brief recess. We'll then have a public forum if there's anyone from the public who then joins us who would like to speak. We'll allow them to do so at that time, and then councilors will be given the opportunity. We won't have an item before us to take action on, so we won't have a formal deliberation, but I want to provide councilors an opportunity to make a statement. I think at that time, because again, we won't be debating or deliberating, I'd ask that we keep it to maybe one statement apiece, but say what you need to say. It'll be unlimited speaking time for each counselor if you wish to avail yourself of that opportunity. So that said, to begin the evening, I'm going to,
Mr. President.
yes, Councilor Boschman.
So a guy like me says, I want to talk to Calvin or the mayor. You don't want me to ask any kind of questions whatsoever pertaining to the budget? All you want me to do is listen to what they have to say?
That's not at all what I say. I want you to feel free to ask questions of clarification. If you're not sure what they've said, if they can provide additional clarification to the line items, what the items were intended for, how they arrived at that particular number or determination, you may ask that question. What I don't want is a question that leads to what your opinion is. That's the point, is for them to inform us what the budget is, what the proposed budget is that is before us, and for you to make sure you understand that clearly before we then move forward to our mission, both later this evening and then ultimately next week, which is deliberating and voting on the budget.
I'm going to do
Is that
my
clear?
best. I'm going to try my best.
And that's what we'll do. That said, I now want to turn this over to the mayor. Good evening,
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mr. President, councilors, and Fitchburg residents. Nearly 2 weeks ago, I submitted my FY 2020 budget for you to review and approve. Tonight, I would like to explain what this budget means for the city of Fitchburg. The FY 2020 budget shows the importance of continuing the growth of the city's commercial sector. Future growth in the city's services will be possible only if we continue to expand the city's commercial tax base. Game On Fitchburg will be opening in the fall of 2019. The city's marijuana growing facilities have given new purpose and a value to some of the city's old mill buildings. We will continue to seek new opportunities for commercial growth and to encourage new businesses to locate to the city of Fitchburg. This spending plan for FY 2020 maintains services, increases the amount paid to reduce the unfunded pension liability, expands debt service capacity within the budget, and meets the city's net school spending requirements. Staffing at the fire department now meets National Fire Protection Association standards, and the city is weaning itself from the grant funding used to grow the department over the past few years. The FY 2020 budget does include the addition of 2 stormwater workers for the Public Works Department. In order to make these gains, we have not been able to reduce our reliance on block grant and Chapter 90 funding, nor increase the initial budget for snow and ice. As in FY 2019, this budget does not include the full appropriation for stormwater MS4 expenses, which will have to be funded next year through free cash. Likewise, because contract negotiations are ongoing with the police and famous unions and the cost of settlement is unknown, those settlements will have to be funded next year. Because of these demands from next year's free cash, the FY 2020 budget includes an appropriation from this year's free cash to a reserve account for future snow and ice costs. There is also an appropriation from free cash to police, legal, and community development departments, which will help mitigate the cost incurred by the city in allowing the marijuana industry to establish itself here. This appropriation represents host fees which have already been collected from new marijuana establishments. While the FY 2020 budget is balanced, it requires revenue estimates to be increased, leaving less possible excess revenue available for 2021 free cash. The city has been fortunate in the current year because we have been able to fund projects at the police station, schools, airport, senior center, and public works, as well as acquire new vehicles for the fire department, police department, and public works department. We have also used free cash to begin the process of updating the city's zoning ordinance. To accomplish what needs to be done, the city requires additional revenue without placing an undue burden on the citizens and taxpayers of Fitchburg. An updated zoning ordinance, active economic development, and an overall willingness to encourage investment in the city will lead to the commercial economic development that we need. The process of developing this budget began in January, when my office asked department heads for their budget requests. Those requests were due in February, and in mid-March, the city auditor, city treasurer, my chief of staff, and I met with all departments to review their requests. From mid-March until early May, the finance team and I met often to review changes to the requests and to sometimes meet with department heads to explain those changes we had made. Department heads were given a copy of the department's final budget just prior to the budget being submitted. I appreciate the time and understanding that all parties have invested in this budget. The process has not always been easy. The department heads requested what they felt was best for their departments, and we could not always honor those requests and still achieve a balanced budget. Last year, the council president requested that this variance between amounts requested and granted be shown. Those variances show in the budget you have before you in the far right-hand column. Last year, the council president asked for a more thorough review of the budget being presented, which we are prepared to do tonight. So at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to the finance team, who will go page by page through the budget and explain some of the recommendations. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess to start, I just would talk about the process a little bit more. The whole budget process is laid out in Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 32, which basically says that the mayor recommends a budget, and the city council may, by majority vote, make appropriations for the purposes recommended, and may reduce or reject any amount recommended in the annual budget. So tonight, we're presenting a budget and explaining what we have, and you as a city council have the ability to accept the budget or to reject it or to make reductions in it. The statute does not allow city council, without the recommendation of the mayor, to add to the budget. And what you're reducing or rejecting is the budget, which is the expense items in this budget. The revenues fall from whatever the expenses are. So if there's an interest in changing something with the revenue estimates, there has to be first some change in the expense. So I would just talk about it in terms of process, what the council can do, and I think this is partly what is expected for Thursday, is recommended cuts in the budget, and that would be in the expense line items. So at this point, I'd ask the council to turn to page 4. I'm going to speak for a little bit on the revenue items that are in the budget. In this particular budget, property tax makes up 42% of the budget. State aid is about 46%. Local revenue is 11%, and available funds is 1%. That gives you an idea as to how our revenue comes in. The first section on this page is taxation. This is our local real estate and personal property tax. We've increased the levy by 2.5%, which is allowed by law. Added new growth, which is whatever additional building has been done in the city in the past year. And then we take back a reserve for abatements of $950,000. This amount is kind of a, I want to say, reserve for bad debts. It's not for uncollectible taxes because we basically collect everything we bill, but it's for any taxes that may be abated or exempted. And there are certain statutory and abatements and exemptions that are allowed. Anything that's not, the other purpose of the reserve is so in case a taxpayer wants to challenge their assessment and in fact wins an abatement on their assessment, it would be charged against the reserve.
Mr. President, question on that?
Counselor Boishman.
Why did we go up to 900, why did we go up to 950,000 when we had $700,000 on that, in that thing, right, before?
Okay. So offsetting the 950,000 on page 5 is an overlay surplus of 700,000, which is revenue. That's basically saying from previous years, we've been reserving 950,000 a year. We aren't using that all up, so we have a surplus in that account, and we're putting 700,000 back into the budget. The difference of 250,000 is what, on average, we're actually using. That's about the total of our statutory abatements and exemptions. On occasion, we have bigger abatements, and we have to absorb them in some fashion.
No, Mr. Brooks, quick question, not for me, not for the council, but for the public, because you're doing this for the public, I understand. Could you explain to the public that on your 2.5% guaranteed every year, that if we don't raise the taxes this year, then next year, we can go up 5%? That you're guaranteed under the law to go up 2.5% as long as there's growth. Am I right?
All right, so a quick lesson on Prop 2.5. What Prop 2.5 does is it allows the prior year levy, which is the amount of taxes we can collect or we bill, that can go up 2.5%. Doesn't mean your individual tax bill goes up 2.5%. It doesn't mean the tax rate goes up 2.5%, because the tax rate is a function of value, the value of your home, and everyone's home divided by the amount to be raised. Basically, that works that if you're, simply put, if your house doubles in value, your tax rate's going to be cut in half because we're going to tax the same amount on that particular property. Taxes can go up more, on an individual bill, it can go up more or less than 2.5%, based on the value of a particular kind of building versus others. So if the value of a single-family home goes up only half as much as multifamily homes, then the taxes on a multifamily are going to go up more than 2.5%, and the value on a single family will go down less, will go up less than 2.5%. It's the levy that justifies it, is what is increased by 2.5%.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, the next section has to do with state aid, which I said makes up about 46% of the budget. The first section is on the MSBA reimbursement. That was the reimbursement the city of Fitchburg was getting in relation to the building of the Fitchburg High School. The high school debt was paid off this year in 2019, so there is no more reimbursement coming from the state to pay that debt. And as we go further into the budget and we get to the debt service, you'll see that there's about a $2 million decrease in debt service, so the net effect on the bottom line for that is zero. The other state aid, that education in general, is based on the governor's budget. The legislature, I guess the Senate recently passed their budget, and they're at some point headed to conference and then a final state budget. I expect that there will be a supplemental budget presented at some point, because I expect that the Chapter 70 funding will go up for schools, therefore net school spending will go up, therefore we'll be putting through a supplemental to acknowledge that increase in revenue and the higher net school spending. Just as a side note, for the school budget and school spending, and this would include the school indirect costs, Chapter 70 accounts for about 70% of school funding, and local receipts or local money is about 30%. Okay? On page 5, the first section is local receipts. This is money that we collect locally. I would point out that the increase in the estimate from, it does say 19 to 18, it should say 20 to 19 at the top of the column, is $1,177,000. Everybody see that? That's how much we're increasing the estimate. Because that's such an increase, that will affect availability of free cash in FY '21, because we're pushing our estimates closer to what actual numbers are. Counselor?
Oh, I apologize. Counselor Green.
Under licensing and permits,
Yep.
I do see that there is an increase in that revenue. So I would like to point out that even though at times we think that the city of Fitchburg isn't building or accommodating new business, certainly from the additional revenue that we're collecting, it does mean that our tax base is increasing, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Part of that increase is from additional buildings. The other piece is because we've hired a fourth inspector. We have somebody that can go out and do annual inspections, and we can charge a permit fee for that.
And those annual inspections are on multifamily homes and
And
commercial?
commercial, yep.
Okay. And then also on that page, available funds and transfers, a one-time
Yep.
down towards the bottom.
Can I answer that
Sure.
in about a minute?
Oh, sure.
Is that all right?
I got plenty of time.
Okay.
Counselor Squalia.
On that same light item, the licenses and permits.
Yep.
For the FY '18, right? It looks like
Oh, FY '18, okay.
yeah, the budgeted items for FY '18, FY '19 are the exact same that show is in the recap.
Correct.
Are these the exact numbers, or are these
Okay, so
rounded?
I will answer that in a minute, too, if I may.
All right.
I'll answer that question. We've had to increase these estimates in order to balance the FY20 budget. But what I would say is $1 million a year increase on these is not sustainable. So it will be important as we move forward with future years to keep our spending increases at a minimum. Mill number 8, which is 2 up from the subtotal local receipts, you'll notice that is 0. That is correct because it was a 20-year TIF agreement, and we are now past the 20 years, and so we are no longer getting that fee. It will show up as additional tax revenue at some future point in time. I would also point out charges for services trash, $2,208,000. That's the tipping fees we collect. That also equals the amount of expenses we have for solid waste services in the budget. That's because we have a landfill. And I would just remind the council that the landfill is scheduled to reach capacity in 2024. We do have conversations ongoing about expanding the landfill, and we're trying, I guess there's some legal or legislative issues that have to be resolved first. And hopefully we'll be able to continue as we have with a landfill operated by the city of Fitchburg. If not, then we have some serious budget issues to consider because we will be losing $3 million of revenue. That's not till 2024, but I think it behooves the city to be aware of that situation, and if there is no future for the landfill, that we begin to make plans to address that before it becomes a crisis.
I have a question on that.
So councilors, let's do that. I'd like to get through the page. Feel free. You can raise your hand. I'll keep the list going, but I'd like the auditor to be able to get through the entire page, and then before he moves to the next one, we'll take questions at the conclusion of each page. Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to actually move to a different page, but I'm coming back to this. So let me finish this whole thought, if I may. To answer an earlier question, what this page has on it is the numbers from the tax recap. So when we set the tax rate, these are the numbers we use to set the tax rate. If you turn to page 50, which is at the end, 50, page 50 shows the actual payments received each of the fiscal years 15 through 18. And then the 19 budget is actually what we used on the tax recap. And 20 is what we would probably be using as well. So this gives you an idea of what the actual numbers are versus what the recap numbers are,
Oh, recap is just last year's budget number.
which is basically last year's budget number, yes. What I would point out here is that the budget number we have for FY20 is $11,054,500. It's less than the amount that's the actual for FY18 of $13,292. So the budget we have is well within our reach. It's just tighter than it used to be. And in terms of free cash, how it would impact us, if you look at the FY18 actual, excuse me, of $13,292 and compare it on page 5 with a recap number of $8,887,000, the difference is $4.4 million. That's what's going to free cash in FY19. That's why this year we had over $6 million in free cash, because we had a good actual compared to what we had estimated. If you're looking ahead to FY21, you're comparing, say, the $13 million that we collected in FY18 against the $11 million we're budgeting, and you only have $2 million going to free cash. So we're half. That's half of what we had this year. That's why these estimates are you need to be aware of what we're doing with this budget. That it's workable as a budget, but it's going to give us less free cash the following year. Going back to page 5, non-recurring revenue has no change. Other revenue sources, you'll notice reimbursements for related expenses, water and sewer. That's the two enterprise funds reimbursing the city or the general fund for indirect costs, which are the health insurance, life insurance, general insurance, pensions, overhead, and other costs that the city or the general fund incurs on behalf of the enterprise funds. So the enterprise funds give us that additional revenue. And finally, the last line is available funds, $825,000. That's composed of two pieces. One piece is $600,000 that would go to a reserve for snow and ice, and we'll cover that. I'll show you that in the expense budget when we get to that point. And we're basically using this savings we had this year in snow and ice because we had a relatively mild winter. I know it didn't seem that way in January, but at the end of the year it was. And using that to pre-fund the deficit for FY '20. So we'll be having less of a burden on our free cash for next year. We're kind of pre-funding it. You'll see it as a separate it has to be a separate appropriation. It can't be part of our regular snow and ice appropriation because we're only allowed to deficit spend if we budget what we budgeted last year. So if we added it this year, we'd be over $1 million in budgets for snow and ice, which means next year we'd have to, again, budget $1 million, and we're not in that position. Because it's a reserve, it's a separate line item, but it is subject to appropriation, which means the council will have to vote to transfer the money out of the reserve to snow and ice, or to wherever else the mayor may recommend and the council may choose to do it. That's 600 of the 825. The other 225,000 represents FY '18 and FY '19 host fee payments. These are for our host fee agreements with marijuana businesses. They're supposed to be, the host fee money is supposed to be used in some fashion for mitigation. So we're putting it in the budget, and basically I'm saying that there's 25,000 going to legal personal services, 25,000 to legal expenses, 75,000 to community development personal services, 75,000 to police personal services, 25,000 to police vehicles and equipment. That's to represent that the city is incurring, in the course of doing business, incurring costs to help get the marijuana business up and running. I guess I would, if I may say, are there any questions?
So Counselor Boishman.
Other excise room tax, I guess.
Yep.
That would be Great Wolf.
That's Great Wolf, yes, sir.
Why are we going right to the max to $1 million?
Let's see. If you look at page 50,
Yeah, I see
you can
that.
see that we've been $1 million or $1 million plus the last few years. So the line can support it. What we have to watch out for is if something happens to them partway through the year.
Yeah. So what,
That's the risk we
I
take.
can't ask questions, so I just want to know. You told me I can't ask any questions, so.
Well, all right.
Counselor Squalia.
The tipping fees being equal in the budget.
Yep.
Offsetting the tipping fees with the cost of charge for services. Does that include the $175,000 that will likely be charged for recycling?
At this point, it's balancing with whatever the budget is. So if there's going to be an additional appropriation, we'll have to figure out how to do it.
Because last year, we were charged the $175,000 that we haven't been charged in years prior because of the contamination levels of the recycling.
Right.
So that's not, that's going to have to be.
I'm assuming that's in the budget, because I'm assuming that the health department would have expected that. It can be in their contract.
Okay. And the ambulance service fees, the $520,000?
Yep.
So June 30th, 2020, I have in my notes that the contract is up for our ambulance service fees. Will that negotiation or whatever, do you anticipate that'll change?
We just signed a contract, I think, for the next 3 years, isn't it?
And it's the same,
It's the same
Same
amount,
rate.
except for the final year. I think we get an extra 10,000 on the last payment.
okay. Thank you.
Counselor Green.
Going back to the available fund transfers,
Yes.
with the $225,000, with the new wording for our host agreements, is that money that we can be expecting in our new host agreements, is all that money going to have to be shown for impact statements, like that we have marijuana grow facilities or manufacture facilities or distribution facilities?
Yep. So, Council, if I may, Mr. President.
Please.
Council, yes, the legal department has done an excellent job of encompassing what those impacts are built within the host agreements, and the associated costs that we're spending or expending on are a part of the impact explanation, if you will, in the host agreement.
And could those expand as we get further into the development of our marijuana business?
The associated impacts?
Correct.
I think there's certainly unknowns to what all impacts may be, and there's always an opportunity to sit down with these companies. As we already have with experience with the associated companies in Fitchburg, they're very helpful in terms of sitting down and speaking about the host agreements and implementing changes if need be, as statutory changes happen at the state level. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Donnelly.
Thank you. The reimbursement from the water and sewer department, $100,000 apiece, is those arbitrary numbers, or are there any basis for?
There is a basis for it. It's based on projected costs that the city is incurring on behalf of the enterprise funds for the health insurance, life insurance, all those costs. And then there's a recognition that the city right now does not pay for water and sewer services. So that amount is, I guess I want to say, negotiated into the agreement to get to the prices that we have here, the 920,000 and the 1,150,000.
Thank you.
Counselor Di Natale.
To an earlier point about the $175,000 in the health, we appropriated a supplemental budget we appropriated free cash for that in FY18.
Okay.
Raised the budget from 450 to about 625, and that's what their budget is this year, is 625, and next year it's 630, so it is in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Boishman.
Go back to fees and license and permits. Now, I'm going to try to be off the subject of debating it. I always thought that when we hired a third person or fourth person in the building department, I was under the impression that he was just going to do inspections of industrial areas. That's what I thought the whole thing was for, huh?
Commercial.
Commercial? Oh, I thought it was industrial. Oh, all right. So commercial is apartment houses?
Could be.
Yep.
All right. All right.
Okay. Moving right along, page 6. Page 6 is
I'm concerned what you would consider a slow pace.
page 6, this is a summary of expenses reconciled with the revenue estimates. If you look on FY20, it shows a balanced budget, actually $2,499 excess revenue. Where the other columns at the bottom balances show negative numbers, that's a deficit that was covered by free cash appropriations because we don't show the free cash within the budget numbers. And I just point out the two right-hand columns. One, FY20 versus 19, that shows a comparison of the proposed budget to current year projected spending. And the right-hand column, mayor versus requested, shows the difference between amounts requested by the department and amounts granted by the mayor. I think that was something that we had not really populated well in prior years. This gives you a chance to see what departments are asking for and what has been granted or not granted by the mayor. I think it's important that departments have some ability to speak about their needs as they go forward. Okay?
Question, Counselor Green.
Specifically for community development, FY '20 requested 800,000, and was allocated 420,000. So why 800,000? Why such an?
I think-
Counselor, I think we can jump into that when we get to the.
We'll get to that when we get into the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so at this point, we're on page 7, and I would turn the discussion over to the Mayor's Chief of Staff, A.J. Terigny.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Councilors, starting with the legislative portion of the budget, the total operating cost is $613,984. Moving down to the city council personal service, there's no change. City council expense, there are slight changes, advertising with 4,000, ordinance code supplement 2,500. That varies on different ordinances or legislation that's passed by your body, and a $1,500 increase that was requested by the council president that the mayor honored. Down to the city clerk, personal services, these increases are based off of contract agreements, COLAs, and steps. And then city clerk expense, very minor increases there. Flipping to page 8, if you would. Election personal services, increase of $40,000. This is based off of 3 elections. We have a municipal preliminary in general, as well as a federal presidential primary in March. The election expense, you will see minor increases with the 10,000 more particular. That is assuming an early voting hall of some kind, as City Hall will not be completed by then. More details to follow in terms of the exact location and exact price. This is an estimate, of course. Then moving down to the license board personal service and expense, there are no changes. Before we move on to the executive, any questions on the legislative?
Counselor Squalia.
Where does it show the revenue for the election to offset from the state reimbursement? Is it just deducted from the whole, or is it shown in revenue somewhere?
Any state money would be, grants, and it would be off this.
In the general other state revenue recurring, or, no?
It wouldn't be recurring, is it? It depends, it changes from year to year.
Changes from year to year, yeah.
Reimbursement for fringes grants?
No, it's not in the,
It's not in the budget.
it's not in this budget.
Not in the budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Executive, beginning with the mayor's office, $210,636. This is a vanilla budget. This also, councilors, what I forgot to mention is the legislative. We're operating on the assumption of a 52.4 week work year as opposed to a 52. So you will see minor increases regardless in personal services. For the mayor personal services, you'll see step increases. Mayor expense, there's no change. Human resources, a total operating budget of $157,983. Again, step increases for personal services. In the expense account, you'll see slight movement of money. More so, they're changing the office supply and printing and moving those lineups to advertising. Advertising for job postings, recruiting services, and the like. Moving to legal of the executive.
Counselor Boishman.
Yep.
I don't know if I can ask this question or not. Why the big raise of $7,000?
Sure. So there's step increases, of course, and we're also rectifying grade and step issues within the personal services account in that line item.
The woman's only got 2 years on the books, 2 years.
Okay,
It's not like she's been there for years,
I understand.
and she had no prior experience. She got her experience
Counselor.
here.
Counselor,
I know, sorry.
thank you. Counselor Squalia.
What does the 52.4 week a year mean? Does that mean that we like automatically include some overtime
No,
in
it
their
means
salary?
That means we're working 52.4 days, or 52.4 weeks, rather than 52 weeks. So we're increasing their personal service, no overtime. It goes straight to the personal service line item.
If you look at the calendar, 365 days in a year is 52 weeks, usually in a day. This year is coming up as a leap year, so there are actually 2 extra days in the year. So that's the .4. The last 2 fiscal years have been just straight 52 weeks because they've begun and ended on Saturdays or Sundays.
Okay.
All right. Legal legal total operating budget is $274,786. Personal services are step increases. Legal labor and mediation with no change. Legal expense, there is a $6,000 change in here. Counselors, as a reminder, in FY17, we consolidated those line items into one. That $6,000 certainly represents increases in those varied line items. Might I also add, in the registry and other fees line item at the bottom, there's a $12,000 savings. That represents a change in statute when notifying property owners. You no longer have to do it by constable. We can do that through certified mail, which can get very expensive, particularly when it's out of state. And with that, I will yield the floor to our treasurer, Ann Cervantes.
Question from
Or questions, I'm sorry.
Counselor
legal.
Boishman.
Question for the young man. So the total cost for legal services is $275,000?
Approximately, yes, sir.
That's a lot of money, isn't it? I remember the council from across the aisle used to complain about this being so high.
Counselor, this is an opportunity to question the numbers here. If you have an opinion, you can certainly express it at the end of this meeting or through the cutting process. But if you're questioning increases or how they arrived at the number, feel free. But
Oh, I guess it's all right. You're all right, Brittany. You're saved this time.
All right. And again, with that, Ann Cervantes. Absolutely.
Beginning on page 11 with the assessor's budget, the personal services increases are steps and contractual increases. Down below, under their expense, the reduction in the contract services is the city's contract with RRG. This year was the first year with that, and we were able to go out and rebid it for next year and tailor it more to our needs. So that has resulted in a decrease in the cost of the contract. Revaluation expense, $30,000. This is a revaluation year. The city is required to fund that line in case the state requires us to review the revaluation that RRG does for us, or even if we did it ourselves, we would still have to fund that line for a review.
Counselor Boishman.
On the contract services, I presume that's the assessors. So is the mayor telling us that the price is going to be $125,000 all the time versus $150,000 we paid last year?
It's going to be $127,000 this year, and it's scheduled to go up 2% a year. I think we have a 3-year contract with them?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it'll be
2% a year?
2% each year for the next 2 years.
We guarantee them 2% a year?
That's,
It's standard in most contracts, yes.
All right.
Counselor Squalia.
With all the other assessor expenses that we have, how much of that goes to RRG? You know, we have $421,000 total expenses with $127,000 for contract services. How much of our, travel and state, travel and meetings, legal costs, clothing allowance, all that, how much of that does go to RRGs? That's all in-house?
That's for in-house only, correct. This is an outside contract.
So
What you see of the 127 is directly billed to the city for their service, period.
we have a head clerk, a principal clerk,
No, that's for city personnel,
right, that's in assessor personal services.
correct.
So we have a head clerk, a principal clerk, and an assessor, and a part-time data collector.
Correct.
For staff. Okay. Thank you.
Page 12, auditor. Again, the increases in personal services are steps and contractual increases. No changes under expenses. Outside audit, the $3,000 increase is by contract. Actuary services, we're required to do a full valuation every other year. This is our off year, so the cost is reduced. And then the school credit is we've increased, that their share has increased $1,000 to help cover the increase in cost for the outside audit. Purchasing. Again, personal services is steps and contractual increases. You see the last line in the personal services section is less school department. We've been working on reducing our reliance on a contribution from the school department to support the deputy procurement officer, and we've brought it down to 0 this year. Under expenses, minimal changes. Under printing supplies, it's always budgeted at 0, and as departments use the services during the year, a transfer will be made to the printing for the services that they provide the department.
Counselor Bochman.
The deputy procurement officer, 75%. 75% is paid by the school? Or is it paid by
That
us?
was in FY '19.
In the city pay.
The city paid 75%, correct?
The city pays 75%
Right, so
and
the
the school only
schools-
pays 25?
They did this year. Next year, the city's going to pay 100%, and the schools will contribute 0.
So in actuality, we're hiring a position for that now? Another position for a procurement officer?
We've had the position has been there for several years. It initially started off as a school position, paid 100% by the school.
Right.
Over the last 4 years, between the school and the city, we agreed that we would pick up a 25% a year over 4 years, to eventually picking up the full 100%. So in FY '19, they were paying 25%, we were paying 75%. Next year, we will pay 100%.
Do we have that much work?
Yeah, there is. We have a lot of things going on.
Mayor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, let me tell you what is going on and why procurement is exceptionally busy in this city. And this I get when I go to mayor's meetings, Longs Joe School Roof and Gutters, Longs Joe School Water Main, Longs Joe Crocker School. All of these are procurement issues that have to go out to bid. There's paperwork involved, mounds of it, all right? The procurement officer, who's one of the best in the state, came from a city that did half of what we're doing right now. And I don't need to be reminded every day that we are exceptionally busy, and that's a good thing. So, we could probably add another person in there. We won't, of course, because we can't afford to, but there's a heck of a lot going on, And everything, again, has to go out to bid. And they have to put those packages together. It's not simply pick up the phone and call the Yellow Pages, and get a roofer up there to do a job. It's a real strict process.
I want to remind councilors, I know we all have our opinion of who's doing enough work, who's doing not enough, and who's doing too much, but that's not the purpose of this, if you have a question about what the numbers are and how the numbers are being allocated, that's fine. But this shouldn't turn into a commentary of, is there enough work? Whose work are they taking on? This is about what the dollars are funding.
Geez, Mr. President, I thought that was a very good question I asked. I wasn't trying to have a contact with him.
I'm not saying you were, I just don't want it to lead down that path of,
That never crossed my mind.
okay. Counselor Di Natale.
You also have to add the water main replacements, the sewer separation projects. I mean, we have things in this city that no other city has. The airport,
Don't get me
I
going
can't
on
imagine, if you probably add up all the contracts that purchasing goes through, it's probably in the hundreds of millions. So I just wanted to add those three. I know the sewer separation projects are ridiculously time-consuming. That was told to us years ago by the previous purchasing officer and the previous mayor, so, and the former wastewater deputy commissioner, Mr. Jordan, so, thank you.
Mr. President, I just wanted to add, Councilor Boschman, you spend a great deal of time in City Hall, and we're all thrilled by that, you know that, of course. And you go into the purchasing office, look on that board. They keep a tote board of what they're working on. It's always chock full. That's right.
I'm not questioning.
No, that's all right, that's all right. I think it was a great question. Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
Yeah, on that, I think we just put out today a procurement offer, a bid offer for sewer manholes. So we do a lot of bidding on the city website. I just have a question on the personnel. We have the chief procurement officer, that's full-time.
Yes,
The deputy procurement officer is full-time.
yes,
The procurement officer / buyer,
full-time.
full-time. The clerical, was that just a temporary position and that's no longer required?
The clerical, there was a third position that was clerical. They switched it from a clerical position to the procurement officer / buyer.
Okay. And the offset printer, is that the print shop employee?
Yes.
And is that also full-time?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fair to assume, unless it says something, unless there's a percentage next to it or a disclaimer in parentheses, every position listed is full-time. Is that correct? Thank you.
Or you could tell by the rate,
The rate.
by the salary in it.
Okay.
Continuing on page 14, information technology. Again, salaries are steps. Under the help desk technician, the department requested that that person go full-time, but the mayor did not grant that. Under expense, very little change there. Under information technology services, the software support, those are fixed costs, contractual costs. Under support for city computers, that is an increase just to repair and replace equipment as needed. PEG access and cable related. The expenses line is for negotiations with Verizon and Comcast. The capital equipment line is for capital projects such as fiber optic replacement. The project that we did on Boulder Drive not too long ago where they put in the high-speed cabling. Fiber, thank you. And then those are offset by PEG access and cable related receipts. Parking. Very little change in parking, steps and contractual increases in the salaries, and just a small reduction in the parking fines, collection supplies. It spikes approximately every other year when we need to buy new parking ticket books, and we just bought them not too long ago, so I don't think we'll be needing them in the coming year. Tax collection. Again, the salaries are steps and contractual increases. The workers' comp systems analyst, there's a reduction there because the person who held that position retired last September, and we replaced her with a person who's lower paid. Under expenses, the only increase there is postage. There was a postage rate increase last January, so that's affected our account. As you may remember, not too long ago, the council voted an increase to this year's postage account too, for the same reason. Debt service. So Mr. Brooks touched on this somewhat when he was speaking earlier. Under maturing debt, you see the $2 million reduction that he was speaking of. So we paid off the high school and the fire station on North Street, but that is also comes with it a reduction in the reimbursement from MSBA for the schools, so of about $2 million. Long-term debt interest, that is also down for the same reason, because the debt payments are down, or the two that we completed this year. Short-term debt interest is increased this year. That is almost entirely due to the first temporary borrowing for the City Hall renovation. We'll be borrowing $10 million for the coming year to get that project, or to keep that project going.
What project is that, you said?
City Hall.
Oh, City Hall.
Okay. And then the last line there, reserve for capital spending, the $720,000, that will be used for capital purchases with with the city council's approval beforehand. It also serves as a placeholder for future debt, such as the city hall and the library, and then the Crocker School. So when those projects do hit as permanent debt, there won't be as much of a jump in the debt service account.
Counselor Di Natale.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the reserve line item. One of my fears earlier in my tenure on the council was when the fire station and the high school were paid off, there was obviously going to be a lull period for a couple of years until new debt kicks in. So you're doing this, and then it goes like this. And what previous administrations would do is they'd take that money that they would have had for debt service, and they'd put it into recurring expenses. And then when they took out new loans, they don't have the money to cover the new loans because they've now put it into recurring expenses elsewhere, and then they were forced to make layoff reductions. So this is a forward-looking plan, and I got to give credit to Calvin and Ann, because what they're saying here, folks, is even though there's a lull period, well, I'll give credit to the mayor too, because he's got to sign off on it, but there's a lull period between when the debt's paid off and when the new debt kicks in. So we got to keep it level. So in 2 or 3 years, when that debt goes up again, we're not forced to increase our budget substantially and therefore make cuts elsewhere to cover it. So this will cover us for smaller items until we get to the big fish, which is, when is the real debt uptick going to take place? Is it 2022?
2021 for the city hall.
So the next fiscal year. So this will hold us until then. So I just want to thank you for putting that in there, because when people see that, they immediately assume that's an area for reduction, and instead, that's a very smart financial plan for future needs that you know about today. So I'm glad to see that being employed, because it hasn't been in the past, recklessly, I might add. So thank you.
Counselor Boishman.
I would just say thank you to Marcus, because he talks to his father. On the long-term, short-term, could you tell me where the airport debt is? Is it in there? The long-term, short-term?
The airport is going to be in the maturing debt, or the long-term.
Long-term. And who's paying for that?
It's in the budget.
It's in the budget?
It's in the budget.
Thank you, Counselor Boishman.
Thank you.
Counselor Green.
Again, on the 720,000 on capital spending, smart move on that. Is any portion of that, would that be used for, or could it be used for expenses when it comes to the school department and their ongoing capital need improvement projects that always come through as emergency? Or is that strictly just for city non-school use?
I think it could be used.
Go ahead.
It could be used for anything that the city council appropriates it for.
Thank you.
Anything that the city council appropriates it for, that the mayor puts an order in front of us for.
Well, yes, of course, that the mayor recommends. I'm sorry, yes. Oh, okay, my apologies.
We do not have $720,000 that we get to play with as a council.
Divided by 11, I'm good at math, right?
We do need offices at City Hall, though, those shiny new ones.
Just one thing that I didn't mention earlier, under maturing debt, 1 million of that 1,805,000 will be for a pay down on the Longzhou roof project. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Trudney.
Back to me, my friends. All right, starting on page 18 with community development. Total operating costs of $420,852. Community development personal services, again, based on contract agreements and steps COLAs. Moving down to community development expenses, you'll see that the marketing and promotion line items have been combined for ease of use. Moving further down the line at contracted services for $10,000, this line item represents for the rail trail project, for surveys and title work to be conducted for for the project itself, for the easement. So we're planning on future costs for that. For demolition, and Councilor Green, this gets to your point of earlier, the demolition line item, we have typically funded through an order from the mayor and approval by your body from available funds is demo. So last year there was a $300,000 line item, as you can see. Again, we will address that as free cash is certified in FY '20. The DEP compliance, this line item, typically we fund around $20,000 and then have to make increases as we work with the state, particularly on the North Street lot and the Central Steam Plant. The city has applied for a grant with Mass Development for the steam plant to help come to a further conclusion and wrap up that project so that we no longer have to address this issue. The land purchase that you see for $30,000, actually that line item was just recently funded by your body through a free cash appropriation as well. Moving on to page, any questions on community development?
Before you move on, Counselor Green.
Can we go back to the demolition line item?
Yes, ma'am.
So where are we getting the $300,000?
The mayor did not fund it, as you can see, in FY '24, Mayor, it's a zero. So in FY '19, in FY '20, the request was $300,000. The mayor funded it at zero, and we will address that as we normally have through available funds.
Is that going to pull out of the $720,000 that we have?
That's not, available funds is free cash, so that is a capital reserve account.
So will that, thank you for that clarification, but so will that, because again, $300,000 for demo surprisingly doesn't tear down a lot of buildings or structures. So I'm wondering if free cash is becoming a lower amount, which we were instructed, you know what I mean, to watch out that account is going to go lower. How are we going to continue to fund demolition at the rate where it's making an impact for these
Councilor Green.
neighborhoods? Okie dokie. That's,
Councilors, you can ask questions of clarification. You have ample opportunity after tonight. This is the primer. This is where you get the questions formulating, and this is your opportunity to then, after tonight, get on the phone, send emails, do your fact-finding. And we'll have time for plenty of deliberation, an entire evening of unfiltered and unadulterated deliberation next week.
ooh, yeah.
That's right,
ooh.
exactly. Must see TV. But tonight is really to clarify what is being proposed to us. That's it. Councilor Zarella.
I just wanted to go back to the Community Development Administrator line item. Now, I want to clarify, I don't have a problem with this at all. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it correctly and understanding correctly.
Sure.
You said the increase of the 12,000 was step increases and COLA?
That's not, no, that's not correct, sir. For FY '19, the position was filled and left partial through the year. Thus, the actual for that position was 43. Whereas if you go back to FY '18, a fully funded position of someone being there full-time is 53. Thus, the $10,000 difference.
Gotcha.
We have since filled that position and are funding it full.
That's what I expected it probably was. I just wanted to make sure I had the details clear in case anyone asks me about it. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh.
I just had a question on the rail trail, the easements. That's supposed to start taking place fairly quickly, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Councilor Squalia.
So the demolition line item that Councilor Green was talking about, so the 81,000 from FY '19, that's something that we appropriated in addition to the CDBG funds that we grant for demolition. So we added 81,000 to the total CDBG funded demolition pot.
So that's correct. So that 81 also represents previous unspent free cash appropriation from the previous fiscal year. It was spent in FY '19 along with CDBG.
And so this is just community development saying, we'd like another 300,000 to demolish buildings, and maybe we'll deal with that with CDBG funding or free cash in the future.
Correct.
And the planning board stipend for $5,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Actually, thank you for bringing that up. If I may, Mr. President.
Please.
The Executive Director of Community Development, Tom Skorowski, recognizes the role that the planning board has been playing, most recently with the ordinance changes and the zoning changes that we've been having recently that have addressed many of our economic development concerns. Similar to that of the Licensing Commission, we'll all receive a stipend of such, and the chair of the zoning board. After consideration and recognizing the work that the planning board does, the mayor certainly wants to provide some sort of small gesture to the chair of the planning board, to that of the ZBA as well, for the work that position does to help move along the zoning and ordinance changes that the city has. The work that the chair provides is a crucial role in understanding and helping the city move forward with our ordinance changes. So that figure is reflected as the $1,668.
So,
Counselor, you already have the floor. You don't need to keep raising your hand.
we're proposing to pay the chair only of the planning board the same price, the same stipend that we pay the zoning board chair.
Correct.
And then we pay the license commissioners approximately $2,066 each of the three.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just elaborate a little on that one. This would be a new stipend for the planning board chair. There are two steps in paying somebody. There's the authorization and there's an appropriation. What the budget is going to do is appropriate money for that position. The council will still have to vote on some kind of an ordinance change to authorize the payment of a stipend to the planning board chairman. That'll come further down the road as we begin to work through our ordinance changes and begin to codify some of the things that are in this budget.
Counselor Di Natale.
$300,000 that they requested for demolition, that is above and beyond CDBG, right?
Correct.
That's not going to be used from CDBG.
Correct.
Right, thank you.
Police, if we could move to page 20, if you will.
Okay, 20.
Total operating for the police department, $8,573,025. The police personal services, along with benefits and stipends, the police are under negotiations with the city for their contract starting with FY20. The increases that you do see, because the contract is not settled yet, represent the difference in actual spent in FY19 versus actual spent in what was appropriated. The chief did not have a full complement of officers during FY19, trying to get them through the police academy, reserve, and moving up the chain of command, and thus those reflections are within the FY20 versus FY19 budget line item. And then you will also see on the top of in police personal services, the chief did request an additional of an extra patrol officer. The mayor at this time has decided to only fund 2 positions, which you're already aware of, in the DPW for laborers.
Mr. Trigny, before you move on, you just spoke to the reserve police officers and kind of the full complement. Are you saying that in next year's budget will be included as an officer is retiring, will now be incurring the additional costs to send them through the academy while simultaneously?
So there's an offset, correct. So there's an offset between an officer retiring and an officer coming on board. And that offset is the time that it takes to train the police officer to become a patrolman, or woman, for that matter.
So no, essentially we'll never lose that complement of the day they, within reason. By the time the officer retires, the next officer will be ready for...
That attempt is real. Trying to maintain that attempt is the challenge, but yes.
Understood.
Yes, absolutely. Moving on to page 21. This is the dispatch that also falls under police. Again, These are contract increases for dispatch under civilian staff support. You'll see the increase of $9,600. This is because of a retirement mid-year and not expending the full line item in FY19 actual. And then we're going to move on to page 22, if you would, to police expense.
Questions from counselors? Counselor Green?
Back on page 19.
Sure.
Total vehicle and equipment, so the request was 319, granted 219. So does that mean that there will be no new vehicles this year in the police?
So I'm getting to that on the expense page.
I'll just wait for you then.
22, page
you.
22.
So Counselor Boishman?
I'll let Council Dean Kelly have the floor. I'll pass my thing over when they get back to me.
Counselor Di Natale?
How many officers have we added since 2016?
Chief, I'm going to have to,
The FY16 budget to now, how many officers have we added?
4.
So from July of 2016 to now, where are we today versus where we were in 2015? How many added officers?
approximately 4.
Four.
Yes.
Thank you. So the 4 officers have been added in 3 years,
16, correct.
correct? Okay. So if we see a level funding, I think for the last 3 years, we've taken care of the police more than most, just from a resource perspective. I know everybody wants more, but we've added 4 in the last 3 years. Thank you.
Counselor Boishman?
One question. I noticed that costs keeps on going up for civilian dispatches. And I keep on reading in the paper how different regionals are going, regional dispatches. As mayor, and that, consider that, you're talking about $500,000?
I don't think that would necessarily fit under the purview of this, but Counselor, feel free to include that in your statement later on this evening.
Okay.
Page 22, police expense, if you could. Office supplies, the provision of prisoners is a slight increase. This is for feeding prisoners while they're detained. The animal control, you'll see that there is hypothetically a $5,000 increase. That's actually representing a savings. The FY19 projected is saving $5,000 or so. I would like to also note, and certainly the chief wanted to have me prove the point that the animal control officer has done an excellent job within the city. He has been helping us reduce costs and take our animal control issues into compliance, if you will. Not only is it a $5,000 savings, and that's based on kenneling costs, and that's determined by how many animals the animal control officer is bringing in through the year, but we're also on average saving $20,000 to $30,000 a year by utilizing the service. So Mr. Todd Pickett has done an excellent job helping the city with this particular line item. Moving on to travel and training. The notable decrease you'll see at $6,000. This is the Training Recruit Academy. This is the intent of the chief sending 4 police officers to the academy at a cost of $3,000 per individual. Vehicle equipment. These are typical increases with maintaining their fleet. Building maintenance. There was a new custodian that was brought on board. The contract services with HVAC maintenance, we funded it at its typical funding at $7,500. The $33,000 savings or deficit you'll see there, that's based off of system upgrades from this previous year. As you know, the chief has an aging building, but we've also appropriated what's not shown in this budget, $150,000 that your body approved for 3 new HVAC systems, if you will, to go in, and that's in the process of being installed. Also the electricity, and you'll notice going forward from here, the electricity and heating fuel, there'll be a reduction from departments who fund those individual line items, such as the police department, the purchasing department, negotiated new supply rates with our electric and gas supplier, and those increases have been, decreases rather, have been distributed amongst the departments. Questions on police?
Counselor Squalia.
The 150,000 additional, was that from free cash, or was that from the police department budget?
Free cash. You approved that not too long ago.
Right, okay, thank you.
Counselor Green.
Again, going back to page 19.
Oh,
where-
and then, yes, Counselor
Okay.
Green, yes.
So total vehicle and equipment with the $100,000, so is that addressing a
Correct.
new,
Those would be those 2 cruisers, and those cruisers will be, I'm sorry, did not get to your point. And the cruisers, as we previously have done, will be appropriating through free cash. This is just showing, as you will see with other departments, certainly the fire and DPW will have capital projects or capital items or requests in the budget report that they're requested. We did not fund as part of the budget, but will certainly address through available funds when it's certified.
and then building maintenance, does that budget allow for a new locker room that was requested?
This does not. So the new locker room that was requested, as you're aware, your body appropriated roughly $10,000 of available funds for the engineering services of such. We're hoping to get those renderings and cost estimates very soon. If not, we actually as soon as next week. From that, we'll be able to make a determination on how to proceed.
So that money will come out of,
Available funds.
for this year?
We're
Okay,
looking
for
at,
this
looking,
fiscal.
correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
So in other words, it'll come out of this current year's FY19 budget is the hope right now. Or,
Yes,
this
we're
year's free
collecting,
cash.
so let me rephrase it. We're collecting all departments, their final requests for the remaining available funds, and then we'll be making orders to your body to approve,
Of which the police locker room.
and of which the police locker room is one of them, correct. Fire,
Okay,
I need to get
all right there.
myself back in order here.
This is very low.
The fire total operating budget is $7,874,457. The personal service and fire and benefit stipends do reflect increases of a contract that you most recently voted on for 3 years. Those increases are included. At fire prevention, you will see a request by the fire chief for a fire code inspector. This position was, the chief has recognized the amount of work that the fire prevention department has been doing over the course of the past few years, and I certainly know you've all recognized that, particularly at the NICE committees. And at this point, the amount of work has steadily increased, that an additional code inspector would be helpful to help alleviate that strain. The mayor does recognize the increased work and certainly commends the great work that fire prevention has been doing for our community. At the time, again, however, the mayor has decided to move forward with only funding the 2 existing positions of the fire prevention director and fire prevention firefighter. Any questions on page 23 before we flip to 24?
Counselor Brochman.
Are there any personal contracts on this, in this department?
Are there any-
Personal contracts?
I'm not sure what you mean.
In other words, it's raises in that on, besides the 12 workers, because I have a hard time with some of it.
Are you saying the chief? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm saying-
Everyone
I'm
else in
asking
that
about
is
the
a-
chief.
yes.
Is that a personal contract? Because we never voted on raises for the chief.
No, that's, the
It's always in the budget.
It's all, yes.
So we can't, if we want to cut the chief, let's say if we wanted to cut the chief, we can't cut the chief unless we cut the budget. We say no to the budget.
You could, yes.
All right, so I want to.
Counselor, like anything like any expenditure in the budget that's before us, you could recommend a reduction or a cut to the item. Counselor Squalia?
Just to clarify what Counselor Boishman said, I believe he's asking if the chief is the only one that is non-contractual, his salary is non-contractual? Is that correct?
The fire chief and the police chief both have individual contracts, which is permitted by statute. There are a couple other positions that are allowed to have contracts but do not. So everyone else in the city is either covered by a collective bargaining agreement or by city ordinance.
So is the fire chief's increase, is that related to his contractual obligation?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But my question is, why don't we vote on it?
Counselor, we vote on it, we vote on the budget each year, so we have the allocation, and you could recommend a decrease or a cut each year.
All right, so flipping to page 24 with fire expense. Fire vehicle and equipment. Again, as with the police department, you will see traditional increases with maintaining a fleet. You'll see that the inspector vehicle, there was a request for an inspector vehicle. This would be for a deputy vehicle, again, for $50,000. This will be addressed through the FY '20 free cash appropriations. The other request as well, similar to what we've done to another fire engine, Engine 2 at Oak Hill does need some preventative work, if you will, and that request will be looked at when free cash is certified in FY '20. The other, the fire building maintenance, you'll see the decreases for electricity and heating fuel for the same reasons I described with the police department. Any questions on fire? Moving on to building, page 25. Total operating budget, $959,360. Inspectional services, you'll see, with inspectional services, again, those are CBAs that have been settled and are included in this budget. There's also, you'll see also a reduction in $19,000. This is for a part-time clerk stenographer. Upon the retirement of this position, work has been delegated to clerical support within the department that's existing, and is paid out of, this stenographer was used for ZBA meetings. They staffed the ZBA meetings. Councilor Zarello certainly knows this, and she was in charge of the minutes and the orders that came out of the ZBA. When that person had retired, we've moved those duties to an existing position. Building department expenses, before we move on from that, are there any questions on page 25?
Counselor Green?
Why the overtime for inspectional services?
Overtime, that's a necessary item for building fires. When we have, the building department goes to vacant buildings off the clock, they have to be secured right away, those types of things. And also the ZBA stenographer will be charged against that as well.
Under overtime?
For her time at the ZBA meetings, correct. This is when,
And that began this year, Mr. Trigney? So the overtime,
Correct.
so hence the reason.
the
for
overtime is for the
projected-
entire department, let me get that straight. That's not just for the ZBA the ZBA attendee, if you will, the clerical support.
Right, so this is to have in the budget for the, in case we need it, if there's something
Certainly,
that happens
absolutely.
after work hours.
Yes, ma'am.
That an inspector or something is needed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Counselor Zarella?
Just to clarify on that point, I just wanted to point out that Mercedes, the clerical employee who attends the ZBA meetings, is sometimes there from 7 p.m. to midnight on second Tuesdays. So that's where some of that money goes.
Goes towards.
It's quite a bit of work.
I got no problem with that.
All right, moving on to page 26. You will see a position that was requested by the building commissioner as a facilities coordinator. As a part of ongoing discussions of capital improvements, building risk prevention and maintenance, and overall care of our facilities, the building commissioner and the mayor have spoken at great lengths to fill a position of facilities coordinator for the city. A once-funded position years ago, this crucial position would assist in prioritizing building maintenance plans, create standards and procedures, and managing risk. Although not funded this fiscal year, this position will become part of a larger conversation in the FY21 budget with the reoccupation of City Hall. So we thought, the mayor and the building commissioner thought it would be important to introduce that in this year's budget, so it certainly does not come as a surprise in the following year. City Hall maintenance, again, electricity has been reduced for the new contracts that were executed. Tax possession maintenance, these are, this line item is charged against, along with our city treasurer when we take buildings through tax title. We have to board, secure, and clean. We traditionally fund at 10,000, and then as needed, we'll appropriate more, as you can see. And if you can remember, your body most recently did that with $20,000 through a free cash appropriation. Any
Counselor
questions?
Boishman.
My question is, on that position you guys want, we're not gonna hire that person this year, right?
It's not funded. As you can see, there's a
Not funded,
zero. Correct.
My question is this, why aren't we using the school department facilitator that he goes around checking all the schools and split the cost? So he's got one big apple to take care of instead of having their own over here and having our over here.
In
I
other
think
words,
that's
this
part
is
of the larger conversation, correct.
What's that?
That's part of the larger conversation of how it will be funded. You're asking to split the cost between the school and the city and whatnot. We're recognizing that that position needs to be funded. In terms of how to fund that, that's not a conversation for this budget, but certainly when we do want to fund it, it will be.
All right, that's all I know.
All right, councilors, I think at this point, there's numerous requests. We're going to take a 3-minute break, and we'll re-adjourn in 3 to 5 minutes.
We're halfway.
page 27.
Yes, and I would like to now turn the floor over to, do we have more questions on page
Councilor Green?
one?
I'm just going to recuse myself for the next section of Public Works so that there's never a look of conflict of interest.
Absolutely, we'll get you at that time.
Thank you.
All right, so yes, now, as I was about to say before we recess, I'd like to now turn the floor over to our auditor, Calvin Brooks.
Thank you, and I would just like to point out that we're just over halfway, so it's downhill from here.
Downhill, well put.
I will I'll remind you this at the end.
So this is the Public Works Department budget. Administration and engineering, the personal services, the changes are mostly in steps. I would point out that the business manager and the civil engineer positions are split between the DPW, Water Division, and Wastewater Division. So their pays show up in 3 different places. The stormwater help that's in here, it's under EPA stormwater temp help in FY19 projected, shows 91,000. That's where the funding is for the stormwater positions this year, which we funded through a free cash appropriation. We've added them as permanent positions, and they'll show up on the next page in the highway budget. On the expense of this part, you notice that stormwater had been requested at 340. We funded it at 40,000, so the 300,000 will come out of, have to be funded from free cash, and that's what we've done the last year or two. Okay?
I got a question.
Councilor Brooks.
Mr. Brooks, does it mind me asking this question?
Go right ahead.
On the stormwater,
Yes, sir.
why are we afraid to start an enterprise fund for that stormwater? Now, you're going to come back and say it's a tax.
Okay, you're not going to want to really ask me that question because I have very strong feelings and I can go on a rant that would put other counselors here to shame.
Is that right?
So,
How about the sleep?
Counselor, that's a perfectly reasonable question. But ultimately, this is what the mayor is proposing to us. If you'd like to introduce an alternative, you can. I'd encourage you to do that either via cut, or
I'm gonna
and
make
it
a
would prompt a
cut.
discussion, or via your statement.
right, I think there is going to be, at some point in the future, some discussion about how to fund the stormwater system. Because for Fitchburg, that's kind of been part of wastewater, and it's being pulled out of wastewater to Public Works, and therefore coming into the general fund. Question is how to fund it. EPA, DEP has a lot of different views on how to do that. And so I think that's something that the consultants will be coming forth with some ideas on. And that's as much as I want to say because, yeah, you don't want to see me going further.
Well, I'll save my remarks to the end.
Thanks.
Okay? So page 28. This is the Highway Department budget. Highway, as you can see, had asked for 4 new positions. The mayor is funding 2 positions. They're listed here as stormwater, labor, but I want to point out that they're not exclusive for stormwater. They can be used for snow plowing and other general duties, just as the other DPW laborers can be used for stormwater-related activities.
Councilor Boschman.
I hate to interrupt you on the stormwater labor. I was under the impression that these guys are going to be part-time employees, 20 weeks.
The initial discussion for FY19 for this year was that they were probably temporary help. The intention this year in the FY20 budget is to make them permanent positions, and so to add 2 positions to the Public Works Department, specifically for stormwater, but recognizing that there's got to be some flexibility that they can do other things.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
I would point out, too, that there are also there is seasonal labor in this budget, if you look at the $20,000.
Yeah, I saw that earlier.
So that's help that comes in for the summer to beef up their workforce.
Counselor Di Natale?
You guys are adding 2 people to the DPW Highway Department.
Correct.
It's not necessarily stormwater employees. It's just giving DPW 2 more men or women so that they will be allowed to do more than what they are currently able to do now, with the thought process being they can free up some time to get stormwater going. These 2 hires are not going to be solely on stormwater. They could do
Correct.
anything the DPW does. It's just adding 2 bodies to the department to give the department some latitude in attacking some of these issues that they can't get to because of lack of manpower.
Right.
So,
Right.
just-
It's meant to work.
stormwater's driving this addition, but it's not like these 2 are gonna be doing that and nothing else.
Correct.
It's just, that's.
Correct. I think there's a recognition that in any of these positions, in trying citywide, that somebody hired for a particular position isn't exclusively doing that position. There has to be some flexibility that if there are needs in a different direction, they can help and assist with that need.
Thank you.
Counselor Squalia?
To clarify Counselor Boishman's question, so with the MS4, $400,000 approximate that we gave out of free cash, that was the EPA stormwater temporary help on page 27? Is that why that's 91,000 and that's
That was part of it, yes.
reduced? So we proposed for 2 part-time stormwater under that MS4 program, and we're now making those 2 full-time. And that's
Correct.
why that got moved
Correct,
to this line on page 28.
correct. Okay. The Water and Wastewater Department share in the cost of a dispatcher, and that's one of the deductions that's added in red to this year's report. And one of the things that we were not able to do this year is to reduce the subsidy from block grant and Chapter 90. That's staying at 100,000. The feeling was that it was better to add 2 laborers than to try and reduce that subsidy. On expenses, as has been mentioned earlier, there's a reduction in electricity and heating fuel because of our new supply contracts. Okay?
One question, Mike,
Counselor Boishman?
on the shared dispatch,
Yep.
does the DPW get to use the same thing too? No, yeah, or is it all gonna be separate?
No, it's one dispatcher, and he dispatches for all 3 departments.
Oh, okay, all right.
On the next page is a listing of highway capital needs. This is an example of where department is just indicating what they have for needs. They were not, excuse me, not funded in the mayor's budget because that'll be picked up out of free cash or other funding sources. Snow and ice, we had wanted to increase that by 50,000, not able to, so it's staying steady at 500,000 for this year. Traffic signals, the maintenance line item for traffic signal is a little bit high for FY19 projected, and that's because there was a recent appropriation. They had a couple of traffic accidents and had to do some work this year, which was unusual. And on streetlights, there's a 25,000 increase on streetlight maintenance. That's due to a network annual fee that has just kicked in, and we have to start paying. Okay? Page,
What is a network annual fee?
an annual fee for the network, streetlight maintenance, I believe that's to manage the streetlights.
Is that the
They're
one?
they're on some kind of a network.
Software system.
Oh,
that we now have to pay for.
so that we adjusted the contract and it got
I think,
increased?
I think the, as part of the initial contract, we had a few years of grace before we had to pay the fee.
Oh, okay.
Counselor Di Natale?
You said it.
Okay, thank you.
This was, I think it was 3 years ago. This was part of that initial contract.
And Auditor Brooks, am I correct? So you mentioned a couple of car accidents that impacted, the increase. Do we get the insurance, do we allocate insurance proceeds directly back to these lines, or do we just, so in other words, if I crash in, the city's going to bill me for the damage to the city property, does that go to the general fund typically? Is that how?
No. Insurance proceeds under 150,000 go to a revolving fund or that's used by the department to fix whatever was broken. I believe in this case, they asked for an appropriation because there was a, I want to say hit and run where they didn't have access to insurance coverage on
That's
that.
usually what happens.
Correct.
Are you talking about the single for there?
Right.
Yeah, there was something going
The
on.
new post we get down?
2 o'clock in the morning and they're gone. I mean, there's no.
Okay. Page 30, cemetery. On this one, the department head had requested an additional labor and a clerical position, which the mayor did not fund. And on the expenses, I just note the capital requests, which again, we will discuss when we get free cash and what we need to do with that. Okay? Parks Department, there's actually a decrease in labor costs, and that's due to personnel changes. We've had retirement and so on. The decrease in the building and grounds line item is due to the Coolidge Park abatement project, which we engaged in FY19. So we don't have that cost in FY20. It's a one-time project. Okay?
Bernard, could I trouble you to get Counselor Green from the hallway? Thank you.
And at this point, I would turn the discussion back to the city treasurer.
I'm having a hard time.
No, I'm just making sure.
She's got writing on her.
You can tell which ones are mine.
She's ready to
Writing all over them.
Rejoining us from recusal is Counselor Green.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mike,
Mr. Counselor Caddy.
I have a question. Can you go back to Parks on page 31?
Yep.
Where's Nate's salary in this?
He is Recreation Department, so he comes further in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, on page 32, Board of Health. Again, as in other budgets, the salary increases are steps and contractual increases. If you go down to the MOPC coordinator, there's an increase of $14,400 there. That is because in this year, the position started partway through the year. Next year, it's funded for a full year. Overtime, there was a request for an increase of $10,000, which the mayor did not grant. Under less CDBG funds, the city has worked in recent years to reduce the amount of CDBG funds that are used to fund the full-time positions. This year, we were unable to do that, so it stays the same as it was in FY19. Less the MOPC grant, just to note that the MOPC position and the expenses for that program are fully funded by a grant. Under expenses, the mileage increase is a contractual increase. Cleanup and board and secure, that's been funded at $20,000, which is, in most years, is enough to cover the expense. Maintenance, not building, that is actually replacement, recycling, and trash bins. If a resident or a business needs one, then they would pay the city for that, so the cost of those come back to the city.
Counselor Goshen?
On the overtime,
Yes.
that overtime fund that we're giving the Board of Health, does that have to do with the cleanups?
It could. I don't know what else it might cover other things too. I'm not familiar with that, though.
$60,000 is a lot of money for cleanup.
I think it has to do with inspectors, again, coming in outside of regular hours and us having to compensate them at overtime rates. So it's their health and safety inspections, so if there's a particular situation that occurs after hours or on weekends, they have to come in and work.
Okay, all right then.
Counselor Zarella?
The cleanup board and secure funds, I recently had a constituent asking about this. What are the criteria for that fund to be applied to a property?
I think if the property were a danger to the public, a health or a safety danger, then that would be the criteria.
Gotcha. Excellent, thanks.
Counselor Squalia?
For the personnel, the director at 90% general fund for health personal services, is that 10% funded through the CDBG? Or is that some other grant?
I think it's various grants. The MOPSI grant is one part of it. I know that. But I think it's funded through some of the other grants too.
Okay, so when I see like sanitary code inspector, 90% general fund, or principal clerk, 50% general fund? Are those also funded through CDBG and a combination of other grants, or?
It would be a combination of the grants listed below.
And when I see regular sanitary code inspector at 0% general fund, what does that mean? Does that mean 100% funded through general grants?
Regional.
Oh, it's a regional inspector.
Oh, regional?
Yes, regional sanitary code inspector.
And that is funded, how is that funded?
Through one of the grants.
Through one of the grants.
Through one of the grants. And when you say regional, what region does that cover?
It's other cities as well. Leominster, I believe, is part of it, Gardner.
North Central Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Counselor Unitali?
If the grant weren't here, that position wouldn't be, right?
Right.
Correct.
Thank you.
Public health nurse, again, those salary increases are steps or contractual increases. Rubbish collection and disposal on the next page. Again, those are contractual increases, both for the collection and the disposal. Veterans.
My question for
Oh, I'm
rubbish.
sorry.
My question for rubbish.
Counselor Boishman?
Since the Board of Health's not here, maybe he related. How are we doing on the separation for recyclable? Are we improving? Because I know we get hit with, what, $175,000? Oh, you want to know?
So, I guess rephrasing the question, so
Okay,
I'm not
I
violating the rules.
take that back, Ann.
Should we anticipate a similar cost to be levied against us this year, or do we see a decrease coming our way in that?
I think there would be a maintenance of that cost. Also,
It's
I'd like
in
to
the
point
budget.
out, correct.
It's in the budget. That was an anomaly because we weren't being billed and we didn't pay.
And that was, I think that was the question of, have we actualized our ceiling there of, that's the worst case scenario that we can expect moving forward. And
I
it'll only
will be
decrease from there.
meeting with Waste Management. Counselor, you're absolutely right. This is a national, probably international crisis, is recyclables. Chinese and India were the largest receivers of that product. They've now cut back, all right, because they're turning away contaminated, what they call contaminated material. It's become so complicated now. I don't know what is recyclable as opposed to trash. So what I think most people should do, when in doubt, throw it in the trash. Because we're not gaining anything. We need to have a discussion nationally, at the very least. How are we really attacking this problem? Because it's a huge problem.
This morning, the country of Malaysia announced it was sending back barges full
Right,
of trash and recycling
exactly.
back to Canada for
Yeah.
violating the recycling ordinances that they have at a national level. So that's the kind of dialogue that's happening of they're burning the fuel of sending a barge all the way back to Canada and unloading it in Canada because it's such an issue.
I want this, we're gonna be meeting with Waste Management to, how can we best communicate to the people in Fitchburg, this is what you should put in the recycle, this is trash. It's become so complicated that it's difficult to figure it out, So what I need is for them to help out with simplifying it.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. And the only reason why I ask these questions, because Councilor Caddy to my right
Yep.
came up with a good idea a while back, and like a fool, I voted against them, and we should implement what he asked for, the trash bags, the plastic bags. Because a lot of tenants, a lot of people just
Counselor
don't
Boishman.
care. All right,
I agree with you, but not the time.
all right.
Counselor Squalia.
Just to further clarify, where is that $175,000 that we paid last year? Where is that in the budget?
Counselor Di Natale.
It's in the
It is in
contract services disposal.
contracted services under sanitary,
Disposal.
disposal of landfill.
Yep.
At 632
Page
has that 175 in it.
The 632
The 632?
has the 175 in it.
But in FY '18, it was 597, FY '17, 471, then we went to
Right, but if you
625.
look back at a couple of years, it was significantly lower.
Okay, so that's our 175 budgeted in.
Yep.
Okay.
You all set to continue?
Set, yes.
Okay, page 35, veterans. Again, steps and contractual increases in the pays. Very little change in the veterans' expense. Under veterans' benefits, historically, the city under budgets and then supplements it later during the year as needed. That's what we've done again here. Council on Aging. Steps and contractual increases under salaries. There is a reduction in the receptionist line item. I don't know what that is due to. I tried to contact the Council on Aging today and was unable to get a hold of them. Under expenses, an increase in building and grounds repairs to complete needed repairs. And heat and electricity, again, those are going down for the same reasons as mentioned earlier in the other budgets.
Counselor Boishman.
I don't know if she would know. I can ask her. On the overtime, on this overtime they got, is the overtime being charged to the people that rent the hall? Since you have to have the custodian come in to close it up or clean it up after? Is it being charged to them?
So there is a hall rental fee that is associated with renting the hall, but there's also, in most cases, it's a public use for the hall rental that when the custodian's there.
All right, all right.
Counselor Squalia.
How are we anticipating less cost for the senior center in heat and electricity if the projected cost is 12 and 30?
For the same reasons I explained earlier, the new service supply contract for gas and electricity for the city. And that
The
was,
aggregation proposal?
no, that aggregation is separate from this. The supplier for the city for gas and electricity, new rates were negotiated. We executed a contract, and that those savings have been distributed amongst all the departments who have heating and electricity usage.
Okay, thank you.
Next page, recreation. Let's see, recreation and recreation director and recreation assistant are contract and step increases. Actually, not step, it looks like a contractual increase. Playground supervisor, that's actually an increase in the minimum wage, so that was adjusted for that. Playground instructors, there's actually been a reduction in the number of playground instructors for the coming year. The Green Street Playground Program will be merged with the Coolidge Playground Program this year. There was a low participation at the Green Street program last year, so they're combining the two. Under electricity, there's an increase here. Just their usage has been going up, and this request reflects the increased usage by the department. Under the pool and splash park, those small changes are just annual fluctuations based on the start of the programs. They start as soon as school lets out, so it causes a slight fluctuation in the costs each year.
Counselor Green.
Under the electricity for recreation, is that electricity that's consumed at the building, or is that due to the pools operating? What is that electricity expense for recreation?
So yes, the recreation department has several electric accounts. ranging from building use to light usage in the park and the pool usage, splash parks and whatnot. They have a series of electric accounts, and they've been noticing an uptick in the amount of usage of that electricity, particularly with the pool.
Okay, because the lights or the filter or the pumps, all that is a
Correct,
increase in expense.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
One question, Mike.
Counselor Boishman.
On Riverside Park, Councilor Donnelly said something about us being that we're supposed to be funded, self-sustained. Where in the budget is that money, do you know? Or is it just, I asked Kelvin that question, he told me it goes into the general fund. But why, if it should goes back into recreational, shouldn't it?
This money is, this budget is for the general fund expenses. So if there's other funding, it would be off this budget,
All right.
showing somewhere else, either as revolving or grant funds, or if it's an outside source, then some kind of a gift coming in, gift or grant coming in.
All right.
Library, chief librarian, that's a step increase there. Under professional, the library was down 2 librarians in this past year. They were able to refill the positions last December and bring it up to the level where they needed. So that large increase of $53,000 there reflects the fact that those positions will be funded for a full year this year rather than a partial year last year. Under library assistants, those are contractual increases with their new contract beginning July 1st.
Mr. Cervantes will see that contract coming before us.
I believe soon, yes.
Yeah, I believe the contract, I guess, isn't finalized, but it was close enough that we could project those numbers in this budget.
Understood. Counselor Unitally.
The professional increase and the library assistance increase, you said earlier that at the start of the year, we didn't have a full complement on board?
For the librarians, the professional.
Were those positions existed in FY '18, though, did they not?
Yes. Mhm.
Why was our budget reduced in FY '19? Why wasn't it the same as FY '18 and we just didn't have them filled? I guess I don't understand why we had it funded, then we cut the funding, and then we were adding it back. So it shows like an increase, even though we're not having an increase. They were on staff 2 years ago. I'm not following this.
Well, the projected for fiscal 19 is lower than it would have been if we had had them on staff for the entire year. We were without 2 of the librarians for part of the year. And then I believe there's also contractual increases in that number, too. It's not just because we were down 2 librarians.
A lot of money.
We see 189, 208, 212, 213, 224, and then it shoots up by 55,000 this year. The last 5 years, there was no such increase, so I'm missing something. Since 2015, we were at around the 200,000 mark. You see where I'm getting at here? That the increases in the last 5 years are not comparable to this current year. So I'm missing something. Is this a new position?
Some of this, too, can also be that the FY '20 number reflects new contract rates, because we have a new contract effective for FY '19. You have not seen the new contract yet, so I'm expecting that there's going to be an appropriation of some sort coming shortly to ratify the contract for FY '19.
So the librarian union, the library union
the Library
is still
Association.
outstanding.
Yes, there will be an appropriation, an appropriation request and a new contract coming up,
And so
hopefully for the next meeting.
That would represent FY 2020 impact and retro FY '19?
No, there would be an FY '19, the FY '19 number I expect here projected will go higher once the new contract is
That's what I'm getting.
approved.
Okay, so,
That number should be higher, so it's showing a 53,000 increase, but I think in actuality, it'll be less once we establish a new
I was gonna say,
base for
because
19.
that is like 25% of the line item.
Right, no, I
That would be a
understand.
massive contract increase.
Right.
So there has to, so the 19 number is not accurate.
I believe the 19 will probably go up because we've been talking about some kind of supplemental appropriation
Okay,
for,
correction.
I'm going to say for those 3 line items.
Correction, it's accurate at the time. You don't know exactly what the number is yet, but once the contract is submitted to us for approval.
Right.
That number for the 19 projected will be higher, making 2020's increase look lower.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
now I'm clear. Thank you.
Counselor Green.
To that point, the almost $54,000 increase, that would be for essentially 5 employees, 3 full-time and 2 part-time. Contractually, what in new negotiation could result? Is that what,
That's what, yeah.
so 5 employees?
On that one line item?
Correct.
Yes, I believe so. It's four full-time equivalents for 5 employees.
Okay, so that's
It-
a $10,000 increase potentially per,
But it's it's representing a 2-year increase.
okay.
So in other
all
words,
right,
we might have seen a $5,000 increase
Okay.
this current year, but we haven't seen it because the contract isn't. So you would have seen increments of an increase of 25 in that line item for this year and an increase in 25 next year.
Right.
What we're seeing is the full 50,000 representing over that 2 years in
Okay,
this year's budget.
thank you.
Right.
Mike, depicting that
That's-
accurately.
Yep, yes.
Very good, Mike.
Counselor Squalia.
A question on the personal services, on that same note. So we have an increase of 85,000 this year on library and personal services. Does this affect at all, last year, we had a note that we were at mid-level hours for certification and compliance to receive 87.5% of state aid award. Are we increasing any hours to increase any state aid award, or?
I
does
believe
affect
this is,
at all?
I believe this is maintaining.
Maintaining.
Yep. Yes. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. You all set? Okay. Continuing down to library supplies, the increase in book and materials for adults and children is to move up to the minimum that the city needs to contribute to continue receiving state aid for libraries. That doesn't get us quite to the minimum. Some trust funds are also used for that, but it's working towards that minimum. Data processing increase is contractual. It's the CW Mars system. Under library maintenance, the custodian, that is a contractual increase. Electricity is down for the reasons we've spoken of earlier, and also the library has changed over to all LED bulbs in the library to save money. The other adjustments are just for needed maintenance at the library. And if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So looking on page 39, this is the last page of the general fund budget, starting with employee benefits. I would point out that on the contributory pension, that's the required funding for the Fitchburg contributory retirement system per the funding schedule. It's the last of 3 years of an 8.7% annual increase in the pension assessment. In the future years, the schedule has 6% annual increases in that figure. And according to our current funding schedule, we should be fully funded in fiscal year 2033. The next line that has a bump up is the Medicare tax, and that's a $100,000 increase. That line is going up for 2 reasons. One is as wages increase, it's a percentage of wages, so the tax will go up. But also, employees hired prior to 1986 are Medicare tax exempt. So as those people are retiring, they're being replaced by employees who are paying the Medicare tax. And so we're also getting that increase as well. The figure of 1.1 million is pretty close to what I project to be the maximum, but where we level off with replacements and we begin to just fund straight wage increases. Other benefits, that's where we pay out vacation and personal time buybacks. That's been reduced by 40,000 to help balance the budget, and also it puts it more closely in line with where our historical numbers have been. General insurance under miscellaneous expenses is estimated to go up 100,000. That's to pay our insurance premium for property, vehicle, and general liability insurance. And right now, we are out looking for possibility of making a change in our insurance carrier. We're still looking at some things. The city has incurred some tremendous losses in the last couple of years with property losses. So while this has been it's showing as a 10% increase, I'm hopeful that that'll be enough, but I'm not sure that it will in the end. And we may need some additional appropriation to cover that cost. Beyond that, there's not a lot I want to say until we get more firm numbers as to what we're doing and how we're going to proceed. Transfers out, there's no appropriation there because those have all been funded in the past through free cash appropriations. The next section's reserve for snow and ice. This is the $600,000 I talked about toward the beginning, if you remember that long ago. And this is to be there as a reserve that we can then appropriate to snow and ice as the year progresses. The school budget of $60,225,000 meets required net school spending per the governor's budget, and as I indicated earlier, there may be an additional appropriation required once the state legislature passes a final budget, and we know what final Chapter 70 figures are. Okay?
Counselor Di Natale.
It's just interesting to note that between the employee benefits and the schools, that's 73% of our budget. So,
Yes.
when people talk about spending reductions, this is where you get into the whole non-discretionary talk. Almost 3/4 of our budget is in schools and employee benefits. That's not even including public safety, DPW, trash pickup. So, the pension increase of 1.1 million, what would through FY 2020, what would that put us at in terms of a percentage of what our system is funded at?
I'd have to look. We're somewhere between 45 and 50% funded. So we're on the low end of the range.
So 45?
Well, low end of the range for pension systems.
Okay.
I know there's one community that is 100% funded. But most communities are, I would say, in the 50s and 60s. So we're in the
I'd say
low end
the
of it.
lion's share of communities, correct?
Are in the 50s and
Yes.
60s, yes.
All right, so, so that 1.1 million is a guarantee until 2033 for an increase?
It'll be about that probably in whole dollars. In the past couple of years, we've been going up close to 9% a year. It's going to drop down to about 6% increase after that.
So when you become fully funded,
Yep,
that 1.1 increase a year goes away?
correct.
Okay. Which is why it's so significant to get there as fast as we can.
It's desirable to get there as quickly as you can without breaking the bank.
Now, one other question I have about this line item, since for me, before you even sit down to look at this document, you're already increasing your budget by over $1 million.
Correct.
Before you even breathe. Are we contributing so much every single year to meet 2033 because previous administrations and city councils refused to fund what they should have at the start?
I think the funding has always met what was required by the system. I think the system was trying to help the city by making accommodations in ways that allowed the cities to pay less in order to meet other budgetary obligations. We've now gotten to the point where the system has to look out for itself a bit and make sure that the retirement system is getting sufficient funds to meet what it needs to do, and that's why we're paying more now than we have in the past.
Who drives the decision, the system or the mayor of the city? Like if the system said to the mayor right now, you have to put $2 million in here, and he says, I'm only going to put 1.1. Who has the final call? The system or the mayor?
Okay, the mayor has the final call in terms of what he puts in his budget.
Right.
However, the system determines the funding schedule, so it's the system that is kind of driving it. I think it has to be a working, there has to be a working relationship between the system and the mayor or the system and the city to make sure that what the system is doing is good for the system, but also doesn't break the bank for the city in doing it.
I'm asking these questions, I get asked a lot by constituents about
That's
this,
fine.
because it's hard to understand. The way I understand it is, and very good explanation, but I think you're being a little kind. The system allowed us leeway to put less, and now they're looking out for themselves. I would argue the system says X, and we kept putting in Y, because we didn't want to put everything we had to in there, because we were spending it on other stuff. That's how I see it. I mean, for example, if the
Counselor,
actuary,
I completely agree with you, but you started to head into
if the
statements
actuary,
that-
so the actuary said 1136, right?
The actuary said 13,189,700.
189.
Yes.
Are we obligated to fund that number? I would
Yeah,
thought we are.
I'm gonna say, yes, we are, because if we don't, then we're underfunding the funding schedule, and there are ramifications for that.
I'm not advocating we underfund it.
No.
I'm just trying to make a point of why we're in this position. Because this is the one item in the budget that drives everything else.
Right.
And it's what people ask about continuously, because it's the biggest increase on the page.
Right. The other thing that can be done, this has a full funding schedule for FY 2033.
Yep.
We have until FY 2040 to fully fund the pension.
Yep.
That's the drop dead deadline. That's when we have to fund it. So you could say, well, if we make lower payments and we can stretch out the schedule, we can do that. I don't recommend that, because going to 2033 gives us some flexibility, so that if we have another downturn in the market like we did in 2008 and 9, we can we have room to stretch out the schedule without throwing a loop to the city and raising the assessment a couple of
I'm
million.
not questioning your methods. This is how we should be doing it. My argument is we haven't been doing it that way.
Okay.
And that's why we're in this position. And I would also add that I am all but certain that the state will extend the 2040 deadline. Not that we should stop at 2030, we should continue on 2033, but the way that most cities and towns in this Commonwealth are going, they're not going to meet 2040. So my other question is on the insurance increase.
Yes.
The liability insurance. Am I to understand that Maya is, I wasn't aware that Maya was the only, I thought they were the only insurance carrier for municipalities. There are other insurance carriers that we're shopping that can get this price down?
Maya is not the only one. They have had historically the better rates and the better option for the city of Fitchburg. However, the city of Fitchburg has had some really disastrous losses over the last couple of years, and so we're having discussions about what is best for the city.
And do we know when that will come to fruition?
We're before June 30th, we're going to have to make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Solicitor Busateri.
Also, the value schedule of the city's assets, buildings, properties, has been reevaluated by Maya, and that is leading to an increase in premium payment as well.
Right. So
And let's also add that there is an argument that we have outgrown Maya.
That's the other thing, Mayor. Correct.
Right.
You
So I think down the road, there's going to be a broader
So
discussion on
clearly,
this.
we need to look around. Yeah.
Mr. President,
We are.
one final question. Health insurance.
Health insurance.
Why are we showing no increase?
There's been no change in the rates.
That's a first.
Well, you get a good treasurer in here, and unlike her predecessor.
What is your confidence level that that's going to be 15.3?
That's where we're holding this year, and we should be okay for next year. The rates haven't changed, so.
Okay, I get nervous about the next year after that then. Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
The final funding in 2033.
Yes.
The last chart I saw from the PRAC for the pension, we're 47% funded.
Okay.
When did it change from 2032 to 2033? Because 2032 has always been the number that we always have said for years, will be fully funded in 2032, but this is the first time I'm hearing 2033.
Keeps going up.
I couldn't answer that. I think in the last evaluation, it may be changed. I'm trying to think what it was that changed in that. We could have made some changes in assumptions and stretched it out a year just to get it a more comfortable actuarial evaluation.
Who makes those determinations?
I would say the board does on the recommendation of the actuary.
The retirement board?
Retirement board, yep.
Who's the actuary?
We use Stone Consulting.
Stone Consulting. What's the Montezut Home Health Care that we no longer fund?
That was from what I understand, that was a donation that the city made to Montezut Home Health Care to provide services for Fitchburg residents. My view is that it's appropriate to contract services with various agencies for specific services that they provide to the city, but it's not appropriate for the city to be making contributions to another nonprofit.
So is that negotiated anywhere else in this budget,
No.
or have we not?
No, we did not fund it last year and have not funded it this year.
Okay. And on that, what is the Disabilities Commission for $1,000?
That's just expense money for the Disabilities Commission,
Expenses for,
for any project that they may choose to undertake. If they want to,
Most recently, they worked with a local bank to purchase a wheelchair that can go in a pool, with the city pool. So they try to use events like that. They use it for outreach, pamphlets that they create, those types of things.
That was me.
Hmm.
What are you talking about?
okay.
They didn't.
Counselor Boishman.
I had another. The $600,000 that we're reserving for snow and ice.
yes.
So what's the limit that if we didn't appropriate anything, that we could deficit spend? Is it like 400,000?
Oh, we have to fund in our budget $500,000 because that's what we did last year. Any expense over that could be a deficit spend. So we could, if we did nothing this year, we would be in the hole about $450,000. If we did not fund it out of free cash, then that $450,000 would have to be raised on next year's tax levy, which means we would have $450,000 less to spend in our budget.
And that's a special thing with snow and ice.
Snow and
budget.
ice, you're allowed to put it on next year's tax recap.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Counselor Boishman.
Mark is doing a wonderful job, and I want to ask the question because I may get everybody screwed up, so we'll leave it that way.
Counselor Donnelly. All right.
Okay? So, moving on, I'm going to skip 40 and go to 41. We have the three, what I'd call enterprise funds to discuss. Page 41 is for the Water Department, Water Enterprise Fund. It's a break-even budget. There are no major changes in the revenue accounts. Page 42 has the personal services, and it's just got the regular step in contractual changes. Nothing fancy there. Page 43, expenses, no major changes. Page 44, fringe benefits, which is under reimbursement to the city. You notice that's an increase of $100,000. That matches what they pay to the city. So they're reimbursing the general fund or the city for indirect costs such as health insurance, life insurance, and whatnot for their employees. Debt service, that's showing an increase because we're starting to do some borrowing now for water mains and water meters. When we get to the water meters will be is a project that's handled by the Water Department, but when we get to the debt service payments, that will be split between water and wastewater, which is the agreement they have. I guess I would.
The timber sales on page 41.
Yep.
Where do we plan on harvesting or cutting our land to sell?
I'm going to answer it by saying out in the woods on watershed property.
That's what it is.
I'm not sure specifically where it would be, Counselor.
And this, the 50,000 that's estimated from the water department on what they estimate they'll make in cutting trees?
I believe that's what they figure they'll make from harvest, doing the harvest, yeah.
Okay.
And as I recall, they haven't for a couple of years because they've been signing agreements with various conservation people to pay them 50,000 in lieu of harvesting certain areas.
So this is just asking for another,
Well, I
Their
think,
donation
I think they're asking to do some cutting.
yes. Okay, thank you.
As part of a management
And part
plan
of a
the
management
forest.
plan, correct.
Counselor Boishman.
Go on page 41.
Yep.
What is the city WTF reimbursement, 172, 172, 172, 172, 172? All the same.
Okay,
over
that's,
for-
that's the,
Are you asking for what WTF stands for?
Yeah, I want to know that too.
I can do a sidebar with you on there.
I believe that's for a wastewater treatment facility.
Or water treatment?
I think this is paying the water, so I believe that the wastewater pays something to water.
Okay.
Now, let me just see, I think that's the one where they pay for the billing. Because
Oh,
the
billing.
water department pays for the billing, and then the wastewater reimburses them
Oh, okay, all right.
for half the cost. Okay? Anything else on water? Okay, turning to page 45 in wastewater. This budget will require some funding from retained earnings. That's expected, it's built into the rates. As they've done rate studies, they're trying now to get the retained earnings down. And it's been intentionally built up and then brought down in order to make the rates a little more smooth. The revenue is based on,
Mr. Brooks, before you go, Counselor Di Natale, and somewhere in the back of my head, I hear Counselor Joseph talking about the buildup of retained earnings.
No, I would just like to get it, can we get the retained earnings figures? Because they're not on here. For water and wastewater, what are they currently carrying?
okay, yep.
That's number one. Number two, no, actually, that was it. Thank you. Yep.
And Mr. Brooks, would you be able to do that before the deadline for submission of cuts?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. The revenue is just, it's conservative estimates on wastewater. Going to page 46, personal services. Some of the numbers are up and down. That's because we rearranged some of the positions within the budget, trying to streamline things a little bit. But you'll notice the bottom line increase is $24,365, which is basically step and contract changes. In expenses, there's been an increased cost of chemicals. That's a lot of the increase. We also did a breakdown of the architectural and engineering projects, so it wasn't just a single number, but it breaks it down. As you can tell, the deputy commissioner wrote these because one of the projects is a WWMP2, which makes perfect sense to me. But they're just representing different projects that we have to do, and some of the planning that has to be done for the consent decree and other projects.
Counselor Green.
Are those personnel-funded positions, or are those
Those are all
spent?
expenses. So it's outside contractors. We're talking about architectural and engineering.
Yes,
Yes.
for all of these specific projects, wastewater, MP2,
Yep.
West,
That's all for outside consultants or vendors doing work for us. It's not our employees.
okay.
Because our employee costs would be in the personal services up above.
Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
It looks like that we have architectural engineering's budget for the West Fitchburg anaerobic digestion request for qualification, or?
Oh, that's good.
Is that what that is?
That's probably what it is, yes.
Yeah. Just wanted to point that out.
Is there a question? Or
No, just pointing that out. That looks
I think that's what it is.
exciting.
Okay. Page 47, again, on fringe benefits, you see the increase of $100,000, which is going to the general fund budget. Debt service, we've added, there's additional bonding that we've completed both by the city and by the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. And capital projects listed here to keep the system in good repair and to meet consent decree requirements. Any questions on that for wastewater? Okay. Airport. Can you hear me, Counselor?
I can hear this one.
Airport, this is a break-even budget. The revenues are in line with previous years. Looking at page 49, expenses. Personal services are step and contractual changes, and it reflects minimum staffing at the airport. There's a airport manager, an administrative assistant, and 2 lines people, and then 1 part-time lines person who works, I think, 8 to 12 hours a week, not that much. One of the lines persons has just retired, so we'll be looking to fill that position shortly. On expenses, I would point out the airport improvements line, which has been reduced 30,000 from FY19. That's the line that we've used for the local share on grants, the 5% that's city. Usually it's 5% city, 5% Mass DOT, and 90% FAA. Our outside auditors, Melanson and Heath, recommended that we fund everything into the grant accounts, and that's why most recently City Council has been appropriating funds for runway design and permitting, self-service fuel, and there was a Bobcat purchased a year or so ago where the 5% was appropriated to the grant directly, which means we won't be spending out of that airport improvements line going forward. The grants that have been funded we've been spending out of those are pretty much closed out this year. So we should be done with that. And the 10,000 is just to represent that there could be some improvements that we have to do out of our own budget. Any questions on the airport?
Counselor Boishman.
So, my question to you, you already said it's in the budget, but where in the budget that is paying for the terminal? The
terminal is debt service, which is being paid out of the treasurer's debt service line item.
Why is it coming out of the treasurer and not out of the airport?
Because the airport has no money.
So the taxpayers are swinging this bill. Are they going to pay us back?
I think with the airport, there's a long-term plan, which is, and very shortly, there'll be some discussion about accepting a grant for the runway construction itself, and both from the FAA, the state, and the local share. That, I believe, is to be completed in FY, where are we now? We're in the summer of 19, so the summer of 2020, so it'll be FY 21. When I think the bulk of that work will get done. Once the runway is reconstructed, I think then the airport can get back to, I don't want to say normal business, but business where it should be, which is where they can have the jets coming in that they want to have come in. They can do the fuel sales that they want to do with both jets and prop planes, and begin to get to a place where they are covering their own expenses.
I get my question to this, right? First of all, a few years ago, I bought a big pickup truck. But now I come across hard times, so I'm going to ask the treasurer if she'll help me make the payments. Because I promise you this, if
Councilor
we have
Boishman?
another snowstorm,
Counselor Boishman, if you have a question, ask the question.
All right.
I know.
Well,
you
I think if your wife, the treasurer, wants to help you pay for it, that's fine.
but my question to this is, we get a couple of duplicated things. We get the city treasurer. Why is the city treasurer handling the billing down the airport? So we can eliminate the position of handling the funds.
Okay. We are in the process of bringing some of the billing onto the computer system and having it split between the airport and the treasurer's office to have better control, better accountability for the funds and so on. I think if you're looking to eliminate a position down there, it's going to be hard to do because of the way the business is conducted down there at this time. And I think really what needs to happen is, and I'm realize I'm stating an opinion on this, but I think it's getting the airport on track to where it can operate the way it should be operating, and not operating with the expectation that, well, we've got this project and that project and that project when we need to get these things done.
But I repeat my statement that I've been saying for the last 6
Counselor
years.
Boishman.
It's all speculation.
You will have an opportunity
all
during
right.
statement at the end of this evening. I know you have a very specific opinion about the airport. And I do not want to deprive you of that opportunity, but it's not now. Counselor Squalia.
Just continuing on what Councilor Boishman said, if we are sharing the cost or the duties of the administrative assistant of the airport with the duties of whoever in the city hall from the general fund, are we looking to make the administrative assistant of the airport part-time in any way?
I don't think we've talked about any of that at this point. I think what we're trying to do is and it's kind of following along some of the recommendations of our outside auditor and of good accounting practices, where you separate certain things like billing from collections. And that's one of the things we're trying to do, where the airport administrative assistant would most likely still do the billing for the rents, but the collection of the funds would be in the treasurer collector's office. And fuel sales, we have self-service fuel going in. They will still be doing fuel sales that require somebody from the airport to drive out to a plane and fill it up versus the plane coming to where the self-service fuel is. But I've asked that, and I believe this, we will be moving toward having all fuel sales be done by a credit card to make record keeping and so on easier to follow. And some of these changes, I think, will free up some time for some people, but also allow other work to get done that maybe isn't getting done or isn't getting it done as well as we'd like to have it done.
Okay. What is the catering line item? It was $858 in FY '18, and then we have $300 projected.
I believe catering is when they're, okay, the 850.
Food catering?
Yes, I believe the 858 in FY '18 could be from the, an opening of the terminal building. No, it's not a terminal, what is it, administrative building?
Administration building?
Can't be a terminal, it's not a right airport. But I think there was a ribbon cutting and stuff, so that could have been that piece. Some of the catering just has to do with
Private jets.
private jets coming in where they're asking us to provide some services, some food services for them, and in return, we charge them for it. So the revenue comes in on the revenue side. Yeah, they have a catering handling fee up above.
Okay, so we are reimbursed some
The
portion.
intention is that we should be getting reimbursed, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Part of the service they offer. Counselor Zarella.
I just wanted to ask, because it's come up twice now tonight, what are the job responsibilities of the administrative assistant at the airport? Is it solely handling of funds?
Counselor, we're going down this path of really operational level, and while that's a just question, I would ask that you direct that after this meeting.
Certainly.
Thank you. Counselor Di Natale.
I just wanted to mention something good about the airport, and that is, 2 weeks ago, the CEO and chairman of the board from Leonardo DRS, company I work for, that is at the old GE plant, Bill Lynn, who was former Assistant Secretary of Defense under the Obama administration. He flew in from Crystal City 2 weeks ago with his contingent of aides and what have you to give a presentation at our company for our 50-year anniversary. And he was able to tour the facility, and he had good things to say about the airport. He said it's better than some that he's seen before that. And, you know, again, I know some in this room don't like the airport, but, you know, there's somebody, you know, utilizing it to get to one of his businesses in a quick fashion, because he went to Connecticut, he went to St. Louis, all in the same day. And, you know, with all these projects going on, it will only increase the appeal to have locations here. And that's just one example of where it's used, and it's used by these private entities to get to their facilities. And I just wanted to point that out, that it was good to hear that he used that airport, and he liked the new building, and he saw the stuff going on there, because he said to me that he's seen a lot of municipalities where they have airports that don't even come close to this one, and we still have work to do. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It was a good little plug on his part. And this is from a major company with, over 15,000 employees in the United States, so, thank you.
So, all set on the airport? So at this point, I turn it over to the mayor's chief of staff to take us home.
Wrap it up. Very quickly on page 51, councilors, this is the staffing levels for the city. You'll notice that the increases are generally for the DPW Public Works and wastewater. Between Public Works, wastewater, and water, there are shared positions, as we already previously talked about. The total, if you add up FY20 and FY19, is the 2 additional positions that are represented in the personal services for labor with the DPW. Other than that, there are no increases in personnel over the course of time for FY20. With that, I would like to turn it back to the council president.
I got a question.
On local receipts, Counselor Boishman.
I got a question on the staffing. You're saying to me that there's going to be no increase in the fire department from 81 to 83? Well, I guess we're on page
It's 83 for
51.
the past 3 years, or for the 2 years.
19.
This is 17.
You said 18, 19. And we got, we got 80. I thought we had 81 firemen.
That increase happened in the previous fiscal year.
Huh?
That increase happened in the previous fiscal year.
Is that right, happened in the previous fiscal year? Because I was always told it was retirees.
No, you voted on the grant. It's part of a grant process.
Oh, the grant process, yeah, I understand that. But I thought I asked the same question on the grant process. What was going to happen after they came off the grant? When they come off the grant?
They're maintained.
We retain them?
Absolutely. That's the purpose of the grant.
Counselor, you all set?
Don't get me going. No, I'm not. but- We're going to ask questions now, right? We can say stuff?
Soon.
We can say-
Counselor Squalia.
On the staffing levels also, why in this budget do we not include the synopsis that we had in our last budget, which shows schools are at minimum to meet net school spending, public safety at functional minimum, public works at or below levels to provide adequate services, et cetera?
Because we're at the minimum for adding the services. So there was no need for that to be in the budget.
Well,
In the
in
staffing.
last year's budget, see, we have information that gives us more background on our staffing levels compared to required service, but we left that out of this year's budget.
Because we are meeting the minimum for all of our services.
So,
Previously, Counselor, the council had requested where we failed to meet minimum services. These were past councils spanning from before my time, because we had failed to meet the appropriate services. Once we achieved minimum services, it was no longer needed because it was no longer at the request, but I'm sure they'd be happy to provide such a chart moving forward.
yeah, I appreciate it.
But again, that's not necessarily part of the budget, it's just a helpful graph to us. It's,
Correct.
staffing levels aren't, inherently budget, they're there to aid us. So if it's helpful, I'd be happy to extend that request if that's what you're asking.
It's similar to adding what the department requests versus what the mayor's providing. It's all for our knowledge, and it's in the budget. So, having the knowledge, like, for example, last year we were at or below levels to provide adequate services for public works. Are you telling me now that level has been raised with
Yes, both 2 additional personnel.
the 2 additional personnel? Does that put us at functional minimum to maintain sufficient services?
If we're at a minimum, but operating the the Public Works Department.
So would you say that that's at functional minimum to maintain sufficient services?
It's at a function minimum for the budget that's provided to
I
us.
think some of this too is why we didn't put it in.
Right.
Because it was starting to be hard to understand what we were doing,
That item is not something that we actually is before us to vote on. It's,
Well, it's all part of the budget when we talk about, staffing levels. So it is before us. So, okay, so where would I get that information compared to last year's explanation?
I would say it's close to what it was last year because we've only added 2 on the DPW.
Right. So would you say then we are at or below levels to provide adequate services?
Counselor, they've just stated multiple times that we're above the quota. We're above the minimum. We're at or above. So the question has been answered.
At or above? Okay.
Counselor Di Natale.
I don't need that information because you provided it last year. It's the same budget this year except 2 more people in DPW. I don't really see the purpose. Not to mention, who determines what the minimum is? It's subjective. Mr. Laxo or DPW could use 50 more people. They're never going to get it unless we live in fantasy world. So that's why I asked earlier, since 2016, how many more police officers have we added? The answer was 4. How many more firefighters have we added, gentlemen, since 2016?
2.
Oh, by the way, the numbers that we've added to, Chief Roy has said many times, we are now at the minimum requirement for NFPA standards, which we've never been at in over a decade. How many firefighters have we added since 2016?
2.
Well, at least 2.
At least 2, but we're at the minimum number now. We weren't before that.
Well, I mentioned that in my letter.
Right. And on DPW, we added 2 bodies. I don't remember the last time in my 10 years here we've added anybody to the DPW. So if you look at right now versus 2008, we are way ahead of the curve.
Providing a statement at this point.
Well, I'm providing a statement, Mr. President. I don't need to see that information. It's already been put out there publicly, and the presenters have said very clearly on day 1, this is a level-funded budget with 2 additions. So the answer is already obvious.
Counselor Di Natale, thank you.
And I'm going to continue because I still have the floor.
Counselor, we're asking questions. We have not. I've been equitable in how I've judiciated this from the beginning. You'll have an opportunity to provide a statement. We still have a counselor with questions.
I have questions then.
Okay. You have questions, proceed.
What is our bond rating right now?
A+.
What was it 4 years ago?
I don't know.
Is it better today than it was 4 years ago?
I believe so.
it is, yes.
Thank you. In the FTE staffing levels, 381. Look at FY15, 357, 359. We've been adding staffing. Public safety is at the highest level it's been. Now, we have taken care of fire and police, and I'm glad to see you guys have added DPW. My only other question at this time is, when you put in, my issue with this package and is...
Counselor, you'll have an opportunity for statements and opinion at the end, so I know you have a question. Please move to that.
I'm all set.
Counselor Boishman.
Again, Mr. President, on the school, we talked about that because you called me up and you asked Mr. Druckmann not be here tonight. I want to know the coming in and the coming out on school choice, on the school department. That's what I want to. I got other questions, but I'll wait for Mr. Druckmann here, that special night we have. The second thing, I want to make it very clear.
I would also like to add, Superintendent Jokla has offered, he said you had a couple of questions for him, and he said, at any time, we're still going to hold a meeting and a presentation with he, and we'll open it up to school committee members if they'd like to join him. But feel free. You don't need to wait till that night to get that question answered if it's important to you during the budget process. So he's encouraged any and all to give him a call personally, and he'll even schedule time before and after business hours to meet with you. But please continue.
Okay, I want to get one thing straight, because I'm not as smart as the counselor across the aisle, but I do read the papers and I do remember my history.
Counselor,
about
statement or
the
question?
It is going to be the question about the bond rating. In all fairness, the previous administration, even though I didn't vote for her, she brought the bond rating up It was down low, and she started bringing it up, and like Mr. Trump walked into something good. So that's what happened to the bond rating. Your father walked into something good.
Counselor?
Everything was turned around.
I'm going to ask that you hold this for your statement. We're at the end at this point. Now I'm looking around, we have no one here. At this point, I am offering a public forum to anyone wishing to speak for not more than 2
President,
minutes.
I have a question on the school line item.
Point, order, I had my hand up for a while.
You do, I'm opening this up to a public forum at this point, so I will go back to that. We have no one in the audience, for those at home who have availed themselves of the opportunity to provide a statement to the administration and the council before we vote. So that's, unfortunately, we will not be having a public forum. That said, I'm willing to open this up if we have two counselors. Counselor, once you've raised your hand, and I've written it down, there's no need for you to continue to raise your hand. I've acknowledged you. I just said I have two counselors that have questions. So Counselor Squalia, you may ask a question if you have one.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the goal from the FY19 budget was 85 police officers, and we had 78. So we increased by 1. So the goal would be 6 more. And then for the DPW, their request was to have 6 more staff, so we added 2. So the DPW's goal would then be 4 more, and that was so they could have 1 more crew. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
I guess I'm being very honest when I ask you, Mr. Mayor. What am I allowed to say here? I'm not really sure.
So at this point, we were asking questions as part of the proposed budget process. We were opening it up to a public forum. There's no one here. At this point, I guess I would entertain a motion. What I'd like is for us to, every counselor can speak. I'd like to ask, once, you can speak as long as you need, about anything pertaining to the budget. This is not an opportunity to debate each other, but an opportunity to present your opinions, your feelings, your feedback that you'd like the public to know or the administration to know about the budget process. And then we'll have an opportunity for unlimited discussion, debate, and deliberation next week when the budget cuts and the final budget are in front of us. Councilor Zarella?
Just as a point of information, you actually can adopt that rule without a motion because we do not have a main motion in front of us, and therefore all discussion is at the discretion of the chair.
So that's it. I would ask that, or I would say that each counselor, and I guess we can do it by order of raising hands, or I can just start around the table. I guess I'll just start around the table, and we'll go in that order. Councilor Di Natale, before I begin to do so, did you have any point of clarification or question?
No, I'm going to say something coming up.
I'll start. Councilor Squalia, you are first if you'd like to provide a statement.
I'd just like to say that when it comes to this budget process for FY20 compared to FY19, I really appreciate the in-depth review of the budget and the ability of counselors to ask questions of the finance team. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I would like to just point out that under the legal services, I would like to offer a special thank you to Attorney Pusateri and Attorney Tree for the work and the follow-through that they have done in years past, but this year in particular, because there has been a lot behind the scenes going on. And if we were to actually break down, because a point was made about their salaried budget, breaking that down, it's $65 an hour for each of them, which is a bargain for any legal services. So if you take $65 an hour times 2 times a 40-hour work week, that more than pays for, as a bargain, at $65 an hour for the services that we get from that department. Thank you.
Councilor Donald.
Thank you. I brought in the budget from 2002, which goes back to 2000. It's interesting to see that there are some department heads that have, from that standard in 2000 to 2019, some are 80% higher, 90%, and in at least one case, 100% higher than they were paid. Not necessarily the individual, but the position, from 2000 to 2019. 80, 90, 100% department heads. To me, that's incredible.
Only in
Other than that,
government.
I think, Counselor mentioned about the political part, the mayor, and who's in charge, or the system. You're looking at the system, which is sitting at the table. And if you looked in previous times, you were looking at the system. So I think we're getting back into control. We're on the right path. Thank you.
Counselor Di Natale.
You know, when I look at these budgets and I see anyone ask about goals and about go-gets and needs and stuff like that, every department has needs, every department has goals, but there's that magical thing called available money. So if the police need 10 more cops and the firefighters need 10 more firefighters and the DPW need 50 more people, wonderful. Show me the tree that grows magical money. If anyone in this room thinks that any department is shortchanged, put your cuts on the table, and I'd like to see those cuts given this budget is 97% non-discretionary. I can't wait to see it. Because when comments are made like that, it's a negative. People need to understand the full facts. Every budget in every country, in every state, in every city in the United States, they all have something they want that they're never going to get. That's all it happens in our own personal lives. So when I look at this package and I see what's been asked and what they don't get, I don't immediately look at this and go, oh, well, that's terrible. I ask myself, where's the money coming from? And no one can answer the question because they don't know either. So I'll just be interested to see that on May 30th, all the cuts that will be proposed to get us 6 more police officers and 7 or 8 more DPW workers. I can't wait. The net school spending number, we like to point out that we're at the minimum. You know what? 5, 6, 7, 8, 15 years ago, we weren't even at the minimum. We had to keep carrying a deficit over, right? And that would exacerbate every single year. This administration has funded the schools what they're required, a first in over a decade. And I am the biggest critic of this mayor, as he'll attest. And, you know, the comment made earlier about, well, you know, because of who he is and stuff, things are getting better. And yes, the previous administration was in a deep hole right from the start, but we never were at net school spending, at least in the last decade, until 2015, 2016. So that's not something to poo-poo. That's a big accomplishment for this city, because we weren't even there. I guess I'm being a cheerleader. The reason why I'm cheerleading this is because from 2008, when I started, to now, this budget is the best I've seen in 10 years, and it got better every single year. Okay? More so than others. But there's still a lot of challenges. This is not something to celebrate. They are doing their best to keep within the confines of a revenue stream that they have to abide by. And I want to thank, you know, the auditor and the treasurer and the chief of staff, you know, outside of the mayor. I want to thank these people because it takes a lot of time and effort to coordinate with the mayor to come up with this document. And it's not easy to turn people away in terms of what they want. They have to be realistic. So the auditor and the treasurer are very conservative-minded people with this, which is a good change of pace from previous administrations. And you see it through this document. They're not cherry-picking or sugarcoating anything. So I look forward to looking at the cuts that'll be put on the table that will, you know, let's see if we can restore our funding levels to the dream that every department has. Because for me, as a budgetary expert, I don't really care what people are asking for. I care what we can afford. And unless there's a way to get to that level that we can afford, we can just keep talking about how we're underfunding everywhere without telling people the real reason why. It's because money doesn't grow on trees. Thank you.
Councilor
You
Boishman,
want me to go next?
if you would.
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much, you too, Mayor, and Kelvin. I'd like to thank you for having me come in your office and talk to you. Now, I want to start talking. I want to talk about, I agree with Councilor Donnelly. I think the wages are killing us. And when you get wages that are $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 plus, there's something wrong with the system. There's something wrong with us, when we give that kind of money for wages. We can blame the unions, but we don't blame the union. Look at us, each and every one of us, because we vote on it. And we say, I want to get elected, I can do better, and I can help the people more than I can vote against this package. That's number one. Number two, MS4 program. The MS4 program is very critical. And don't let anybody kid you. It's coming. And it's going to come hard. You don't read in the paper the Merrimack River is getting polluted. And the Atlantic Ocean is getting polluted because our river goes into the Merrimack River. And that's why I'm pushing for funding and have a revolving fund. It's no joke. We're not funding it enough. We don't have any clue how to do it. Let me point out, Councilor Donnelly was right a few months ago when he said we got fined. We got fined $10 million on the MS4 program back in 2006. And if you want me to bring the documentation in, I will. We got fined that much money because we weren't following the guidelines in the MS4. We didn't even start it. Yes, we did. I get the documents at home. So, that's the other reason. And when it comes to DPW, the DPW is understaffed. The mayor says he's hiring 2 people, and they're going to work for the MS4, but they're going to also be able to work for the DPW. I got a catch basin that I've been looking at for 6 years. I got a sidewalk that I've been working at for 6 years. I got a sidewalk that I've been working at for 6 years. I have a problem in a neighborhood with water that I've been looking at for 10 years. 10 years. And you know who it is? My house. That I've been looking at, asking her to fix it. But I haven't said anything because I'm a counselor and I didn't want the people to say, oh, Boschman's getting it done. We can't get our work done. We got 2 people retiring. 2 people retiring in the DPW. 2. So that means those 2 are going to take those 2 places. So how do you figure we have enough? We get 39,000 registered, excise taxes going out. How can we sit here and tell the people the roads and the bumps and the potholes? Too bad. Too bad. Too bad. Ask Councilor Donnelly what he hit after a whole month of me calling up. Seriously? A councilor calling up for a big pothole and we can't hit?
Can we come?
Councilor Boschman,
I get all excited, I'm very sorry.
It's still yours, just...
Okay, I'm sorry.
No one's arguing with you. The floor is yours.
Well, I want to make sure Councilor Donnelly can hear me.
Councilor Donnelly, can we do a sound check?
Yeah. But we got 39,000 excise taxes go out, and I'll give you 30,000 because sometimes the people don't have the cars. And the best we can do as a city is take 6 weeks to 2 months. Council President, you're my proof. We sat down talking one day at the donut shop, and you told me the same problem you had on a berm, and you had to beg. You had to beg to get the berm fixed after 6 months. Come on, really? And we get enough people in the DPW? Come on, they got a lady on 188 Pratt Road. Her yard got dug up for the city plows. She's still waiting, so the guy did it himself. He fixed it. After we told him it's going to be fixed in the spring. We're coming into the summertime. We don't have enough people on the DPW. We bow down to the police department, we bow down to the fire station, but the DPW, who cares about the roads? Who cares? Oh, they're going to talk about the road, but summertime's coming, they're going to forget all about it until we hit that big pothole. And once we hit that pothole, then we start singing the American anthem. And it isn't a nice American anthem. We don't have enough people on the DPW to do the job correctly. We wait too long to fix the roads. And this is one of the problems I've been reading up on, why the roads are getting worse. Because it's taking too long to patch a little hole. It's taking too long. Literally taking too long. Okay, the airport. The airport. My favorite subject. We gave the airport $160,000. The auditor says we're not gonna make any cutback. The auditor says it's supposed to be a self-service station. Now he says, we're gonna bring the gas out to them. So what is it? Is it gonna be self-service or not? Because if we make it a self-service, we can eliminate an airport person. Like all business, you go automation, they get rid of employees. It happens. That's what happens with automation. Employees go. I'm sorry, I like people, I try not to get rid of people, but it's costing me and it's costing the taxpayers money. Money that we don't have. And that's enough for now. Thank you very much.
Councilor Zarella.
Thank you. So I like this budget. So I'm just gonna mention a few positive things that I've noted, and then I'm going to take shameless advantage of my position late in the order to address some of the comments that some of my colleagues have made. So first, I would just like to reiterate what Councilor Green said about the legal department. I can attest to the fact that I am essentially a freshman lawyer myself. I've been in business for 2 years, and I do fairly easy work. I bill out at $200 an hour, and that's standard. So if we're paying them $65 an hour for the excellent work that they do, we are getting the word bargain doesn't cover it. So that I just wanted to note that and give kind of the inside scoop on that to the public. Also, I wanted to note, two of my colleagues have mentioned the increase in salaries for department heads, and I'd like to talk about that more broadly in a moment, but first I would just like to call out one specific thing that I noticed. We see a lot of these, step increases, longevity, and so on and so forth across salaries. I notice the wastewater commissioner is only taking a $771 increase on a six-figure salary, which I don't know what all the contract background to that might be, but I think we should thank him for that regardless, because he's doing a difficult job and he is getting a considerably smaller percentage raise year over year compared to many other positions in this budget. Playing off of that, though, I would like to address something that one of my colleagues mentioned about the increase since 2000 or 2002. The thing is, we're looking at very nearly 20 years between then and now. Even 100% increase in salaries for top-level employees isn't really all that much out of pace with the developments of the economy. If we want to continue to retain and attract top talent, we have to pay at the level of top talent, and things aren't at 2000 prices anymore, 2002 prices anymore. Salaries go up, and 100% increase, I don't know. I'm not an economics expert or anything. That might be on the high end. It might be mid-range. But the fact that we're seeing double-digit total increases, I don't see that as atypical. I've looked at salary ranges across various job titles, areas, geographic areas and so forth. I don't see that as particularly atypical. I hope I'm making twice as much in 20 years as I am now. Yeah. So the other things I wanted to mention are the public safety prioritization, let's say. I agree. Our DPW is a critical and dedicated part of our public safety infrastructure. But specifically with regards to their street repair function and so forth, as opposed to, say, snow removal and whatnot. If we don't have an adequately staffed fire department, things burn down and people die. If we don't have an adequately staffed police department, crime goes up and hopefully no one dies, but still, we're talking about actual crime. The roads are important. The roads are very important. But they're not killing people. So if we have to choose, and on a tight budget, sometimes we do have to choose between having an adequately staffed police and fire department or having an adequately staffed DPW, sometimes you've got to say, this is important and this is important, but this is more important, so we have to do it first. And I think that's what we've been doing. I would love to see all three departments staffed at whatever level their department heads say is ideal. But when we have a limited budget, we have to make priority decisions and say, you know, one of these things is going to have to wait a little longer. And lastly, regarding the airport, I just want to point out that there are only 4 employees at the airport. 5 if you count a part-time line person. But in this budget, there are 5 employees at the airport. I don't actually know what a line person does, but if I had to make an educated guess, I'd say it probably has something to do with maintaining minimum certification standards at the airport. I imagine those are positions we can't cut. I could be wrong, but I imagine that those are positions that the FAA would be very irate with us if we were to eliminate them. Other than that, we have a department head and an administrative assistant. We have to have a department head. You can't have a department without a department head. And we have to have an administrative assistant because someone needs to run the office. Whether it's handling the money, whether it's handling scheduling, contacts from potential customers and whatnot. I work in an office environment. The office would shut down if we had to do without an administrative assistant. It just wouldn't run. So I'm sympathetic to the desire to trim costs where we can, but I see 5 people here, and I can't see any of them that can reasonably be cut. There's none of them that is superfluous in and of themselves. The only way to cut more people would be to cut back on the functionality of the airport, which would be to put us further from self-sustainability. So, I think that if we're going to find any cuts there, it can't be in personnel. I don't see anywhere else either, but it can't be in personnel. But overall, I like this budget. I think that it's been planned out both meticulously, but also in a forward-thinking manner. Our finance team has clearly planned for the future, not just looked at what can we do to make this year's budget look more attractive at the expense of future years, because we'll deal with future years then, right? And I feel like that is the temptation in government all the time, not just Fitchburg government, but all government, is to say, focus on making people happy for the next election cycle. You know, it's an election year, let's make the budget look nice, and when the bill comes due next year, well, next year's not an election year. But our team didn't do that. And I respect that, and I thank them for it. And I hope that we as a council can carry that forward and give the city a good FY20 budget. Thank you.
Counselor Caddy.
So I'm disappointed. I'm leaving on vacation. I won't be here for the rest of the budget.
You want a tissue?
Yeah. So, just a comment on the process here. If you go back 15 years ago, the budget, this is welcoming to me to see it done this way. I caution the other councilors, if you have a question, you got between now and next Wednesday night to call the department heads and ask them the question. It doesn't have to be on the camera. You can ask your question, and you'll have time, you'll get a good response. If, I can't believe it would happen, but if a department head doesn't answer you, then bring up the question in the meeting. But, give them the courtesy of doing that. As far as the budget, I don't see much of a difference between last year and this year physically. I know there's a lot of work that went into this, and I can see that you're looking forward. Like Councilor Rattler said, you're not just looking at this year, because we did that many times. I can see it's a forward-looking budget, and if I was here, I would vote for it. And thank you.
Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Much along following Councilor Caddy, we want to say that this is the mayor's budget. How many times have you heard that every year? Mayor budget. And glad to see that tradition has continued, because the mayor's both is tonight. The mayor's budget is right. And I agree with Joel, and we've been at this for close to 16 years. Is that what you said? So we'll get ready, and we'll get see what we can do and make it even better.
Counselor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have, I want to thank the finance team, first of all. This was very enlightening, I think, not only for us, but for people at home. You explained everything well enough for even me to understand. I appreciate that. I did want to make a comment. Superintendent Jokela, like Superintendent Ravenel before him, reports on school choice numbers fairly regularly at school committee meetings. And if you tune in, you can catch those numbers. But I know that Superintendent Jokela will be more than happy to provide those to us. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
So I'll start by saying I once had a boss that insisted that when you apologize, you always do it publicly, because it's a lot easier to do it quietly in the corner than it is to do it publicly. So I'll say I was less than cordial with my peers, Councilor Di Natale and Councilor Squalia. I lost my cool there, and the reason I did, so first I apologize for losing my composure there for a moment, and I think I was largely motivated by, I remember how I felt the first 2 years going through the budget process. And I remember particularly the first year with this gut feeling in my stomach of remembering how adversarial it was between the council and the administration and the department heads. Everyone's here. Everyone who works for the city is doing it because they believe in what government can and should be, and they believe in the end cause of working for the betterment of the people, the residents and the businesses of the city of Fitchburg. And I remember telling myself, if this is how it continues, I'm not going to be doing this long. And I'm glad, and I look at this process, now, and I look at this administration and the willingness to work with this council and to work through some of these problems together. It's not just the mayor's budget, it's the mayor's budget after a year's worth of soliciting input from us, listening to us, being here every Tuesday, and from our department heads being with us and listening to the questions we ask and trying to tweak things. It's constantly evolving. I know that this administration is working with us. I don't agree on every item, and I could certainly nitpick. I could start going down and say I dislike $1,000 here, and maybe I can scrap up $60,000 to fund X. And that happens once. You get to do that once, and then it's a painful process. At the end of the day, I have to trust in the mayor to put the best budget that he sees and that the department, the heads see before us. So I look at this and say, there's not enough funding for any number of things. I could come up with a list, 60 pages long of funding requests I'd put before the mayor. And we couldn't fund 59 and a half pages worth of it. You know, areas I look at are public safety and public works are constantly there. I was pleased to see the mayor put the proposal for the city hall building manager, because so often we talk about how we're the worst landlords in the city. And we are. And that's not unique to Fitchburg. That's a challenge that all governments face. But it's a building that will now be one of the crown jewels of our city. And we're investing a major capital expenditure in the heart of our downtown. And that's so crucial that we don't let our buildings fall into disrepair. Fitchburg State in the 90s and in the 80s, they had these beautiful buildings and they kept spending, and you saw the kind of continued degradation of the buildings they had, you know, storied buildings. And it took 20 years for Fitchburg State to finally catch up on deferred maintenance. I don't want us to fall in 20 years deep on deferred maintenance on the new building that we've just spent a lot of money on to be the crown jewel of our downtown. And so I'm thrilled to see that that's there as that thinking, and I hope that we fund that position before the building even opens, so this person can really be a part of opening that building and understanding the in and outs of the building and its needs, so that we don't fall behind at any point. I want to commend the mayor on transparency. So many mayors love to take out the mayor versus requested on the department heads, and that's the easy thing to do. No one wants their criticism or what they want, or they're having to deny something publicly. And many past mayors have pulled it out. And this mayor answered the call. Within a year of me requesting and this council asking for it, it was right back in. So, Mayor, thank you for doing that. I think
I could pull it out.
Too late. I'll address the salary thing, and it's easy to beat up on salaries, and it's easy to talk about the salary figures, whether it's a department head or your average mid-level manager or city department level worker. And, you know, by no means did I grow up with high salaries. I grew up well below the federal poverty line, and, you know, my family never saw salaries like this. But at the end of the day, I look at, I'm going to pick on one. Public Works Commissioner, $130,000, and people say, that's a huge number. I can't believe we're paying these extravagant salaries. And that may be easy for, you know, the average person on the street to think that as well. And I remember thinking that the first time. I said, wow, these are huge numbers. The average civil engineer walking out in two of our institutions, MIT and WPI, the average civil engineer walking out of WPI makes $69,500 at 21 years old with a bachelor's degree. The average MIT civil and structural engineer walking out makes $79,000 even. That's this graduating class, 2019. You're talking about a 21-year-old with zero experience in the field making close to $80,000. One, because that's the cost of their education times 4. But 2, that's the going rate for these folks. And by the time they hit the pinnacle earning of their career, as someone who goes out on the road and travels around the country in front of engineers and seen their earning potential, I can tell you $127,000 is an absolute steal. This is an individual who is reputed throughout the state for what he's done. And year after year, under-resourced, under-salaried, under everything, he comes through and patches the city's roads and infrastructure together with duct tape and glue. And I look at it and say, I can't say a thing about that, other than he's underpaid. And that may sound outrageous to some people. He's underpaid in his field, he's underpaid for his expertise, and you can go through line by line. I spoke about an engineer because I work for an engineering school, and I know what they make throughout their lifetime. These are people that have made a sacrifice and work in public sector because they believe in what we do. How I open this up, of saying that we work for the city of Fitchburg and we work in government because we believe in its potential and we believe what we can do for the betterment of the people that we serve. They chose to do that. And I don't think we should begrudge them for making far less than what they can make in the private sector. So I want to thank all of those employees, whether you're at the top end of the pay scale or the low end of the pay scale. You do it with pride in our city, and I think we owe you a whole lot for it. And lastly, I want to thank the four individuals before us. I know there were far many more that contributed to the budget process, but you've sat here for the past 3.5 hours, answering every question we threw at you, doing it calmly and respectfully. And I appreciate all the work that you do to put this budget in front of us. And I'll echo the sentiment of so many other counselors of this is a great budget. This is solid. I think 15 years ago, we would have dreamed of a budget like this. So well done. Thank you. With that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
I have a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Good job on your budget.